Wow. Thrilled. Thrilled to see so many of you here today. A big welcome to the heart of collaboration and impact at the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce and to the Capital of Finance Summit 2024. I can really feel the excitement in the air. My name is Andreas Hatzigeorgiou. I'm the CEO of the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. It's fantastic to have the Swedish Minister for Financial Markets, Niklas Wykman, and the Deputy Mayor of London for Business, Howard Dauber, with us here for this flagship summit. Your presence underscores the exciting journey Sweden, Stockholm, and I believe the industry as a whole is now embarking on, aiming to learn from London, a titan in the financial sector. A special shout out also to every one of you here today. You are the movers, you are the shakers, the thought leaders of finance and technology, and all our esteemed partners that we have collaborated with for this finance summit. Thank you. Together at this summit, we're focusing on how finance can lead the change in tech innovation, sustainability, and societal growth. I can't think of a better crowd to tackle these challenges and drive us towards success. Now, our program is as vibrant and multifaceted as the industry we're all passionate about. We're set for a summit filled to the brim with insightful talks and dynamic discussions. And don't miss out, I'm sure none of you have even thought about missing out on the mingle and the opportunities to dive deeper into the discussions after the final panel, approximately after 5 p.m. Let's meet at the bar later on. I'm sure that you all will take this opportunity and stay. And last but absolutely not least, a huge thanks to our partners, Nasdaq Stockholm, Mannheimer Swartling, and Fogel & Partners. Your dedication is key to fostering a thriving business climate and a healthier society. Our moderator for today is none other than Emelie Lundgren from Fogel & Partners. With her sharp insights as a former financial journalist, she's the perfect guide for our discussions here today. Let's give her a warm round of applause. Emelie, let's dive in and make today a landmark event, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas. And thank you to everyone here in the room. I have to say wow as well. Yes, there's a lot of people here. It was very fun. I'm very glad that you're here from the start of today, hopefully to the finish as well. And as you can tell, even though we're in Sweden and we have mainly Swedish speakers and there's Swedish speaking in the audience, we also have international guests, so we will speak English during today's summit. And let me give a little bit more background of myself, since I'm going to be with you for the entire day. As Andreas mentioned, today I represent Fogel & Partners. I joined roughly 6 months ago, and formerly I worked as a financial journalist, mainly at Dagens Industri, or Daily Industry in English, or DI for short, as all native Swedes actually say. There I mainly led news programs and interviewed different representatives from within the financial sector. It was completely random, actually, or maybe luck of the draw, that I came to cover the financial markets. And it didn't take me long to be absolutely smitten with this part of society. I found that the financial and corporate sector was full of brave, creative leaders and entrepreneurs who wanted to create an impact and, between you and me, maybe not make too much of a fatal mistake in the process. Well, risk creating entails mistakes. And even if it could be uncomfortable to talk about, I'm a firm believer in straightforward and open dialogue, even if it's uncomfortable, but only for the purpose of understanding. And I invite you to do the same during today's summit, to ask straightforward, honest, open questions, but to do so in order to understand. And hopefully, we all bring that openness in today's discussions. But on top of the agenda, of course, before going through the program, our safety. In case of emergency, You have 2 emergency exits. One is just straight back through the kitchen, not the kitchen area, the kitchen. And the other one is from the entrance where you came from. And for smaller emergencies, at the entrance you also have the ladies' and men's room. Okay, now to today's program. Our first segment is this one. We will hear from the Swedish Minister of Financial Markets, Mr. Niklas Wykman. I'll follow up with some questions for him as well. And after that, we will hear from the Deputy Mayor for Business in London, Howard Dauber, visiting us from London. We're very grateful for that. After that, that is about an hour, so until like 2 o'clock. Session 2 is our first panel, which we call Finance as an Enabler for Transition. There we'll hear from representatives from Swedbank, BNP Paribas, BlackRock, as well as Semvision. Then at 3:10, an inspiring segment, we hope, where you will hear from a total of 7 speakers. They are given 8 minutes each for their speech. They have chosen what topic they want to speak about under the umbrella, the quest for innovation. And the final panel as well, starting at roughly 6:30, will be about the sorry, just going to see if this goes with me. And that's going to be about the role of public versus private. There we'll hear from Carnegie, Mannheimer Swartling, Nasdaq, as well as First AP Fund. We end approximately 5 p.m. There we have a drinks reception. Hope you stay for that part. Between each segment, we have short breaks for you to stretch your leg, top off your coffee, digest what you've heard on stage. And we kindly ask you to respect the time for next segment so we don't waste the precious time of our speakers to get the classroom in order. But since we're going to talk a lot about the position of Stockholm as a financial center in an international context as well, we did launch this event in November with a report that actually portrayed how that position is for Stockholm. So this is just a sort of recap to make sure we're all on the same page, since this is what we're going to talk about today. So Stockholm's financial sector employs 60% of national sector workforce, and it generates virtually all growth to the sector. It's actually slightly decreasing outside of the capital. Constitutes 5% of domestic GDP, 20% of all corporate tax revenue, and it's the home to Nasdaq Nordic, or Nasdaq Stockholm as we know it, which actually is the 13th largest stock exchange globally and the 4th biggest in Europe. There are many different rankings, many different factors to take in. The ones that I've portrayed here is the global one. We end up at 31. Stockholm ends up at place 31. It's heavily dominated by US cities and Asia cities, I should say. In Europe, 12th. CEO World, which is more of how you portray the city and how enjoyable you think it is, 16 instead. And then interesting that green financing and the startup for fintech environment, we rank a lot higher. When it comes to pros and cons or strengths and challenges for Stockholm, the report found that the stability, political, regulatory, low corruption is one of the strengths of the city. We have a good domestic talent base to supply talent for the financial sector. And we're top 3 globally in fintech, which means a good, solid digital infrastructure as well. The challenges instead is the fact that we are not joining the EMU, or we haven't joined the EMU. We have the Swedish krona and not the euro, which makes that we can't really reap all the benefits from the European Union collaboration. We lack a bit in attracting international talent. So we can supply domestic, but to attract from other nations, not as well in that as other cities. And the market size. Sweden is quite small. Nordic region is quite small if you compare it to other European, Asian, as well as American cities. That's also one reason that the financial sector has to gather or centralize in Stockholm to connect with other comparable cities and then also become more influential. So, with all that being said, I think it's about time to bring up our first speaker, and it's the Swedish Minister of Finance, Niklas Wykman, who will talk about Stockholm's place in the world and the financial sector. Please.
So, congratulations to this event, and from screaming pink and screaming yellow and perfect English and enthusiasm to dark dark grey or even grey, perhaps. Svengelska and stability is a huge Swift. But let me just start there by saying it is my firm belief and best assessment that a thriving capital market or a thriving city or even a capital of finance must have a very solid ground on stability, consumer protection, transparency. That must be the soil for any growth. If you try to expand the financial sector on any other conditions, you will eventually run into huge problems, either in the financial system itself or eventually in the real economy. So, how boring it might look, stability must be key for any growth in this sector. And I just wanted very briefly to give an introduction to how we assess the Swedish capital market and the present situation in our country. And of course, to have strong protection against instability is key for our country. As we all know in here, Sweden is an open country. We have our own currency, as we just mentioned. We're very exposed to trade and so on. And to be able to keep all those good dynamics in all other sectors of the economy, we must really safeguard our financial system. Otherwise, we will need to have more protections in other areas of the economy. But to be this open, to be this trade-oriented, and to be this very creative and dynamic economy as we are, we must really keep a close eye on the stability in our financial sector. And we have. I mean, a year ago there was lots of turbulence or turmoil in the financial markets. We know what happened in America with Silicon Valley Bank and other financial institutions. We know what happens in Europe with Credit Suisse. And of course, everyone was asking the question, how much risk do we have? Are we exposed and so on? But we were silent, and we still are. Of course, accidents can always happen within the financial system, but we have resisted, and that is thanks to our safeguarding of our financial system. And if we look at Swedish banks, for example, sometimes in the debate, it's like that profitable banks are a problem, but in fact they are a solution to very many problems. And for example, if we look at the credit losses in Swedish banks, they are very low, even to the corporate real estate sector. And if we compare it to other European countries, they are extremely low. And that is, of course, a very, very good thing. And as you can see down here, now when a few of the real estate corporations have had problems refinancing their debt, Swedish Bank has been able to increase their lending to this sector at quite a huge scale. So having profitable and sustainable and well-regulated banks is key to handle other problems in the financial sector. And we can also see another thing, for example, mortgage amortization exemptions. This could tell us two things. The Swedish labor market has been quite resilient. Not very many people have had problems to repay their debts. And also, those who had the functionality in the system is good and it works. And we haven't had the crashes or the really deep downturns that people, some people at least, and many institutions assessed for Sweden. We've been resilient and we managed quite well in tough times. But of course there are problems for Sweden. They are well known and they are often talked about, especially in international media and international assessment that perhaps not fully grasps the picture of the Swedish financial stability. And anyway, I mean, we had this shift towards more market funding in real estate, corporate real estate sector. And of course, all bonds comes to maturity and you need to refinancing your debt. That is an outstanding, still a question in Sweden. I mean, the bank system, what can they do? Some corporations that taken on too much risk, they must come down in risk. There will be, of course, a need to sell some stocks or some buildings for some corporations. The heterogeneity is, of course, huge in this sector. Some corporations are very solid, and some have more problems and need to do more. And then, of course, also the household sector. The indebtedness in Sweden is high compared to other European countries. It is high compared to the average, and it's among the absolute most indebted households in the European Union. And of course, the ratio to income has increased over time. I'm not very much of a revolutionary politician, and of course, just to try to decrease this at a fast pace would create lots of problems in the economy. But it must be clear to everyone that we cannot just continue this development towards more and more indebtedness in the household sectors. Eventually, that will make many households run into huge problem with human tragedy at the end. But it's also, of course, creating instability in the economy as a whole. If we continue this development, we need to still we need to continue having a strong position against indebtedness in the Swedish economy for years to come. But also, it's important to point out that this is not a one-sided coin. This is also, of course, a consequence of the retail participation in financial markets, which is a good thing. When I talk to my colleagues internationally, when we meet at meetings in the European Union and so on, it's not that Swedish households just don't wish to repay their debts. I mean, this is also the other side of the coin of having good financial markets, having retail participation in the financial markets. Of course, if you live in the south of Europe and your only two options is to repay your debt or to put more money to your bank account, then of course it's quite a good option to repay your debt. In Sweden, you have the possibility to repay your debt or to participate in the stock exchange or in funds. And then of course it's much more attractive to participate, getting a higher return in the financial market than just putting your money in a bank account. So this is, I mean, the other side of that story. And we do have very well-functioning financial markets in Sweden, and they are also, if we compare us to other countries, they are improving a lot. And they are improving at a fast pace as well. So most countries are getting better, but we are getting even better. So it's not the situation as in some other sectors where Sweden have lots of problems, other countries are performing better than we do. That's not the case. We are performing very well here. And that's good for two things, of course. It's great for households to be able to participate in the financial markets, having better returns than they would in a bank account. And it's also very good, of course, for entrepreneurship and innovation and new corporations in Sweden, because there's access to capital here that you find rarely anywhere else in the world except for the United States and the United Kingdom. So we came from quite a good position. It's improved even more. But to point out one problem or opportunity, because it's both. We had this huge shift within the European Union and within Sweden towards more and more marketing financing. That is overall, I would say, a good thing, because then it's better to stand on two legs than on one leg. We are better off, we're more stable if we not only depend on the bank system, but we also have the market finance in our system. The research suggests that the economy as a whole is better off and more stable as well. But there is a problem that all this research is done on very major bond markets. And the bond market in Sweden is quite new, and it's grown at a very quick pace as well. So there is a liquidity risk in the Swedish economy. We've seen a few of those problems. There could be more problems to come, even though the development probably overall is good. There is this risk, and we must prepare to tackle that risk in the future as well. So just to connect to the subject here, if we want Stockholm to be as you express it, a capital of finance or a center for financial activity, of course, it's very important to have well-functioning, well-regulated financial markets. Of course, that's key. And we are, of course, very open to the industry, to listen, to analyze, to take active part in your discussions, and also analyzes all your suggestions and how we can improve. But of course, this is not the only thing. There are other things as well. I mean, a well-functioning rental market is very important if you want a dynamic city where people can come for work for a few years and then leave for work elsewhere. We must improve the functionality in our rental markets, of course. That is only one thing. In Sweden, we have great schools as well. I mean, if you want to move from another country, if you want to come from London or Frankfurt or New York to come to Stockholm and work here, of course you want your children to go in the best schools. You want to provide a good future for your children. And Sweden really have good schools. According to the OECD and the PISA survey, we have the perhaps 5th best schools in the world. But if you just read the media, you could believe something else. And that is because you changed. Andreas said that when we studied together at the university, when you studied mathematical statistics, you were perhaps not the coolest guys on campus, but it turned out quite well for us anyway. And of course you call it, I think it's the Simpson effect, you call it in statistics. I mean, when you have a huge inflow of immigrants, of course you will have an effect on the school results as well. But if you only look at the domestic-born children, Sweden perform very well. We need to improve our school system, our education system further, of course. And we also, of course, need to be better to talk about the real conditions in Sweden for people moving here, that we are quite good actually in this area. And just finally, another thing that we need to address as well within the government in our policy making is, of course, the criminality. If we want Stockholm to be an attractive world-leading city, of course, we must also offer safety for people living here, protection from crime. If we continue having a discussion about Sweden being a dangerous place with lots of gang criminality and gang violence and so on, it will be very difficult for any industry that wants to attract the best people in the world to come here. So of course we need to fight crime, and we need to fight it as well within the financial system. And I would even say that all of you working in the financial system, you are key here, because if we can stop money, if we can stop criminal persons from laundering money or from even earning money within the financial system, with more regulation, but also with more awareness and better protection out in the market, we can achieve a great deal. So this would be my remarks here today. We have a very high-functioning financial market in Sweden. We're prepared to listen to more suggestions on what to do, and I believe that we have a common task together, both to improve and also to tell the world about a good situation in Sweden and Stockholm. Because to succeed with your goal, we need to be able to attract the best people in the world. And then, of course, we must be one of the best cities in the world. And that's not only about the conditions for the financial markets itself. It's also about safety. It's also about school system and so on. So thank you so much. And once again, congratulations for this event. And I'm open to answer a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Niklas. I will ask you to maybe move a little bit closer to the screen. I'll reclaim this table. I'd like to actually...
It feels so very unpolite to you to have a back against
We can back a little bit, maybe, so you can see us better. I'd like to actually start with a question of where you ended now, the fact of crime and safety, and it should be a very pleasant city to be in. These kind of things like housing, crime, law, regulation, I mean, that's actually your colleagues' responsibility, isn't it? You have colleagues in the government who actually has their portfolio taking care of that. Do you cooperate a lot with them? How do you influence this matter?
Yes, I mean, when it comes to fighting crimes, we have a very good cooperations with the Minister for Justice. We have a common group that works together with the Minister for Finance and the Minister in Sweden, the police and so on is also in the Minister for Justice. So we work together, especially in two groups, to fight crime within the financial system, but also to fight any economic criminal activity. And it is our firm belief, of course, we need more police officers out in the street. We need to have dangerous people need to be locked away for longer periods of time. We need to offer better help to children that have the risk to join criminal gangs and criminal activities and so on. We need to work on all those areas, but we must stop their money. I mean, we must stop their money flow within the financial system. We must stop fraud within the financial system, because if they run out of money, they run out of capacity and also, of course, of motive to commit more crimes. So that is very important, and we work very hard on that to push back crime. And then also, of course, it's my firm belief that we need to offer. I can see that the mayor of Lidingö, for example, I can see in the front here, of course, to offer great places to live. If you have a family and you have children, you want to live, of course, at a nice place. We need to keep municipalities that offers those families to have good places to live with their children, and we need to also, of course, offer a city here that is dynamic, creative, fun for the younger audience. So, of course, there's many things we need to get to do to be this great place to people to come to work within the financial system.
I interpret it as yes, a lot of collaboration is needed within the government.
Yes, that's the short version, but you never get that from a politician.
I'm a former journalist. That's the culture shock between you and me, yes. Okay, so speaking of which, you published an opinion piece in February in Dagens Industri, or Daily Industry, about change for financial markets. This was a revised mandate for our Financial Stability Board. Also, you suggested cybersecurity, improving it, managing increased liquidity risk, and decrease unsustainable lending. Is this the most pressing issues, do you think, for the financial sector?
They are important, but also, of course, I mean, the capital market union as a whole within the European Union, getting a good regulation in place. It is itself not important for Sweden because we have what the others want, all right. But now when they want to create a capital retail participation in their capital market, we must make sure that it does not come in conflict with the system that we have in Sweden, of course. So that is important as well. And I all the time try to tell my European colleagues, well, it's great with a union, but it's even better with a market and capital. So we need to we really need to argue for our Swedish stance here with good consumer protection, good tax incentives for participating in the capital market and so on.
And final question, then, do you see our I'm thinking the question is, or the answer is no here, but I'll let you answer. Do you see our system, our financial system, as stable, unstable, under threat?
The assessments from our authorities is that we have we have a stability, but there are always threats to the stability, and there are well-known threats to our stability. Of course, the households' indebtedness, the CRR sector are two examples, and then unfortunately the problems in economics normally comes from somewhere where you haven't looked, and you always need to be prepared for that. And that is, I mean, my main task every day, going to the job, to make sure that we are ready to battle an unknown enemy, and that's what what you always need to do when dealing with financial systems, because the problem could be somewhere where you haven't looked, or where you couldn't foresee it. So that's really important.
I think everybody working with the stock exchange recognize themselves in that description. Thank you so much, Niklas Wikman, for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For our next speaker, then, it's the Deputy Mayor for Business in London, Mr. Howard Dauber. And we're hoping he'll give us a detailed description of how Stockholm can become equally competitive as London. Mr. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me on the mic? Yeah, excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for inviting me here today, and for the wonderful welcome I've had on my first trip to Sweden, particularly in a room of so many people where I think pretty much everybody apart from me speaks Swedish. To have the proceedings in English for me is just, I mean, this is what makes Sweden such a welcoming place. And this is my first trip. It's my first trip to Sweden, my first trip to Stockholm, but it's also my first trip abroad as Deputy Mayor for Business. And there's an important message here for Stockholm, because when the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, asked me to find a place to go, he said, you must do one trip. I was only appointed Deputy Mayor in December last year, and we have an election on May the 2nd, so it's time to get one big trip in. And we asked the business community in London, we asked our promotional agency, London and Partners, where is the one place that Howard should go? And was it Tokyo? No. Was it New York? Dallas? Was it Beijing? No, it was Stockholm. They said Stockholm is the place you must go. And why Stockholm? The minister had a very useful graph there. And what you saw was a couple of years ago, the little red line of Sweden overtaking the little blue line of UK a couple of times. And that is the point at which in London we said, hold on a minute. What's going on in Stockholm? And here you have this amazing ecosystem, particularly in the tech sector. I don't know if you know, but Stockholm is the per capita, it's the #1 place for startups. If we had your startup rate, we'd be rivaling Silicon Valley. So I don't know what it is, something in the water, something in the cinnamon, I don't know, maybe. In the cinnamon rolls, there's something in Stockholm that is driving that productivity and that entrepreneurialism. I did think last night as I was wandering around the streets trying to get back to my hotel, and I saw on the map there's a right turn. You've got to take a right turn ahead. And I was like, well, there is no right turn. What is happening? And it took me a while, and I thought, oh, that right turn. Because there's another street up there that I hadn't even thought about, I hadn't even seen. And I think it's the ability to think in 3 dimensions that is crucial to living in Stockholm that maybe makes it such a great place for ingenuity. I'm going to talk about London a little bit. So London for centuries has been a financial centre back to Roman times as a trading city, and throughout the British Empire and more recently, as we globalised, London has been a historic centre for trade and industry and culture, giving us a head start in developing our infrastructure, our expertise and legal frameworks. We are an open, outward-looking global city with over 300 languages spoken. Obviously, the city ourselves, we're about 10 million people in London, so we'd be quite a big European Union member in our own right if we were a country. And it's based on strong open markets, aligned internationally, and we want to remain attractive both to our domestic market and to international firms who look to London both as a stepping stone between Europe and America and the other way, between America and Europe. But more than anything, our story is about resilience and adapting to circumstances. We've had a few issues over the last few years. Obviously, like everybody else, we had COVID, although we locked down in a way that Sweden didn't do, which actually had quite a really big, serious impact on some of our industries. The 2008 financial crisis had quite long-reaching implications into our economy. And then since then, we've had, I'm not going to mention it, no, I've got to do. We've had Brexit, and again, I'm not making a political point, but we've had quite a turnover of governments with the same party. They keep getting rid of whoever's in charge and putting somebody else in, and that creates instability. All that time, incidentally, the last 8 years since Brexit, we've had one mayor, Sadiq Khan. So London's stability has been pretty good in terms of the city. And I should just mention, for those of you who don't know how London is organised, for 1,000 years we've had this thing called the City of London, which actually is a very small district of 1 square mile in the centre of town. And it's a self-governing entity, a little bit like the Vatican, really. And it has a pope, which is the Lord Mayor of the City of London. And traditionally, that has been the heart of financial services, and they promote financial services. And it's one of the richest local authorities on planet Earth because it has all these businesses, but only about 10,000 residents. So it's a very odd thing. You wouldn't invent it if you started from now. But since 2000, we've had a mayor for the whole City of London, which is responsible for transport and housing and planning and policing. And so that's much more like your mayor, Karin Vanguard, here in Stockholm. So I'm the deputy to the mayor of the whole of London. We work hand in hand with the City of London in promotion of London as a business centre and financial services. So where are we now? We are probably still #1 in the world in financial services. That's a bit surprising to us. So we thought that after all the things that happened, we would slip down that table and New York would get the edge again and we'd be number 2. And despite the fact if you go to New York, they've got these big signs on the lamppost saying, New York, capital city of planet Earth, we're not sure that's right. We think we're still there. We're still up there. We are number 1 in fintech. Our FDI was up 68% last year, so more than 2 billion coming into London. We're the number 2 asset management location in the world with 4.2 trillion pounds under management. We've got 138 unicorns in London. That's more than France, Germany, and Singapore combined. And we are doing pretty well. And why is that? We have managed to navigate those challenges. So although Brexit obviously has had some impact, not the impact that we thought it might, because we've been very quick to open up opportunities with new markets. Our international workforce is very strong. So we have the expertise, the talent, and the skills, which are pretty much unrivaled in the planet. We've got a very deep pool of people. And London remains a really good place to live. So we are a global creative hub as well as a financial centre. We've got people come to London from all over the world. In fact, 40% of our employees in financial services are from overseas. And thousands of the world's brightest people come to London still to study and to work. We have an opportunity coming up to look back at the agreements that were made just after Brexit and see if those can be rewritten with a sober head. 7 years, nearly 8 years on from the actual Brexit vote, to say the agreements that we wrote in our determination, not making a political point, but in our determination to be as distant from Europe and set that space between us and Europe as possible, were they actually all in our best interest? And there's an increasing call from businesses and from the Mayor of London to say, actually, that some of these things need to be rewritten in a way to allow for more free trade, more open borders, more easy travel between London and the EU. Now, I'm here for a very good reason in Stockholm. As Deputy Mayor of Business, I'm also the chair of our international promotion agency, London and Partners. And this morning, we launched our office here in Stockholm, which is based in Epicenter. My colleague, Salla Hanninen, is our vice president for the Nordics and for the Baltics, and we'll be operating out of Stockholm, working with Swedish venture capitalists, with Swedish startup companies to bring them to London, to look at London as a place to internationalize from, and also bringing our British companies to Sweden to look at where we can collaborate. And one of the big areas for us is in climate. You may know Stockholm as a city is the #1 location globally for climate technology. And number 2 is London. You know, there's a lot of DNA in common between London and Stockholm. And we do think that Stockholm has the capacity to be a capital of finance. Now, I'm not going to give you all of the answers of how you do that. But what I will say is that London will help. We're looking for friends. We're looking for allies. We're looking for markets. Like I said, if we could have that, whatever the magic spark is that helps you get all those startups, and share that with your deep pool of capital, with our deep pool of capital and with our resources in London and our ability to internationalize, then I think this could be a really, really powerful combination. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds. I'm confident London is going to remain up there as global #1, but that means that there is a big space for being one of Europe's capitals of finance, and we do believe that Stockholm can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not gonna let you go.
Okay.
Just yet. And I actually was wanting to ask you about the fact that you've lost. Yes, you're right. London is #1 in all rankings of financial centers globally and in Europe. In New York sometimes, but usually it's London, despite Brexit, as you said. Why is that? I mean, you said we were very fast to move, but given the interconnection with the European market and the difference, like, how could you manage that?
Well, we were never a purely European market. London's a global market. If you're an oil company in Azerbaijan and you want to raise finance, or if you're that oil company in Azerbaijan and you have a conflict, you have a legal conflict with, say, a South American drilling company, you'd go to London to get that sorted. You'd go to London to use the legal system in London to get that dispute sorted out because you can trust it. So London has always been a place where people from all over the world come to do business. We've got fantastic links, to be honest, via our historical relationship with places like India, Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, via Hong Kong into China. We've got a really good, positive working relationship with countries all over the world.
And there you maybe stand out compared to other European cities.
And we love the Americans. We're very fond of our cousins across the pond, but they do tend to have some knee-jerk regulation, which is designed at protecting. Usually protectionism, American consumers or American businesses from shocks. So, for example, if you want to list in New York, you have to jump through a lot of hoops that you don't necessarily have to jump through in London. Now, we're in quite a competitive market now, so they've cottoned on to the fact that sometimes the things they do to protect their domestic market can have unforeseen consequences in terms of putting off international investors. So they're not crazy, but we are. Well, again, I'm staying out of politics. Who knows what's going to happen in America? But the more unstable they are, the more we like it, because we can offer a stable, dependable, and fair system. I always say a good test of a country is, and this is true here. And there's not many places where it's true. If you're driving your car along the street and the Prime Minister comes out and hits your car, and the police turn up, what happens? Yeah? Here, the police will go, it's your fault, Prime Minister. In London, they'll not only say that, they'll love it. They'll say, oh, Prime Minister, oh, you're in trouble now. And if the Prime Minister says, here's £100, can we forget it? They'll go, bribing a police officer, oh, fantastic, right, you're nicked, off you go to the police station. They'd enjoy it. But there's a lot of countries in the world, including some European countries, where if the Prime Minister hits your car, they're immune from prosecution. They literally can't be prosecuted. If it happens in Russia, that's not going to go well for you. If it happens in China, that's not going to be a good outcome if the Prime Minister's hit your car and the police come. But that rule of law, that justice, that fairness, that sense of common decency, which links London and Stockholm, that is so valuable. And that's one of the reasons why people look to London as a really good place to base their international operations.
Do you feel like the undisputed number one?
No. We feel like we should be undisputed number one.
We basically are in the rankings.
We're going to fight for it. You can't take this for granted, but we don't want to just be number one in financial services. We want to be number one in tech. We want to be number one in health and life sciences. We want to be number one in creative industries. So we want to be the capital city of planet Earth. I don't think that's I better not say that too loud. But yeah, we do. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell the Americans. But we want to have that position. We want to make sure that we're competitive in every sector, and that not only are we doing that, and that's not just a central London and all the financial services and the well-off people, but we're bringing our population with us. We're bringing the outer parts of London. We're bringing all the people, whatever your background, that they should be able to take part in that great success. Because otherwise, it's hollow. It has to be for a reason. It's about making London a prosperous, green, sustainable, nice place to live. The best place in the world to have a business, the best place in the world to grow up if you're a kid. That's the vision. Two things hand in hand.
I also have to ask, since you said you were given the advice, where should I go? You should go to Stockholm. Shouldn't go to Singapore or Hong Kong or New York, something. Were they right?
I think so. I mean, we've already... I've been here since yesterday. So a whole 2 days, but the meetings we've had already, it's clear that they're genuinely good opportunities for, and what's great is the money's flowing both ways. So we've got British-based VCs and funds wanting to invest in Swedish companies. We've got Swedish money coming to invest in the UK, and we've got businesses, British businesses want to do business here, and Swedish businesses want to come and do business in London. So that's a true balanced relationship, and it's very exciting to me.
I also have to ask, since one of the factors in rankings is living conditions and how enjoyable it is to live in London, and I completely agree, London is an amazing city, but it's so expensive, especially housing.
It is, and the one of the graphs. I mean, I wasn't jealous of all of the graphs, to be honest. I mean, the household indebtedness one, you can keep that one, but the slow, gentle rise in household rent costs. I mean, we'd love that. Our housing system is complicated. I mean, it's in a lot of ways it's a pure market system, but it's driven by we've got a lot of overseas investors who've driven up prices, and we're working very hard to build new housing stock, but also to work on different tenures. So our rented sector is much smaller than yours. We'd really like the next generation of Londoners to be able to rent a house that they can afford, which also then offers them the opportunity to save enough money so that when they want to buy a house, if they want to buy a house, they can buy one. So we've got some work to do there, and that's something that the mayor is working very hard on. But yeah, there are ways in which London is more expensive than somewhere like Stockholm, and that's a great. The quality of life here. Everybody keeps telling me is fantastic. You have the sunshine like this apparently every day. I've been told this is normal weather for March, so I have no reason to doubt that. But it's also about if you're in London, you can go out to pretty much see any sort of show or film or theatre or Western show. You can go and see ABBA Voyage, which I recommend to everybody. There are 3,000 people a night, 7 nights a week, and they never look tired. It's phenomenal. I mean, how they keep going at their age, I do not know. But it is a phenomenal show, and I really recommend that. But it's all those things together that make London a fantastic place to be. And as well as, to be honest, yes, things are expensive, but also our wages are pretty high, particularly in the sector. If you've got, and again, I don't want to steal your people, but if you've got people who are coders, data engineers, entrepreneurs, we'll pay them more money to move to London. And I don't want to do that. I want to have both Stockholm and London growing our next generation of people so that we meet demand not by pinching people off each other, because otherwise we're going to end up losing them all to Silicon Valley if that's the route we go down, but by growing the next generation. So, yeah, and we're working on that. We're working on making it a cheaper place to live, but it'll take a bit of time.
London is obviously much bigger than Stockholm as a city. Does size matter?
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. I mean, what you have here is, like I said, per capita, it's like this whole city's an accelerator. This is something really special, and there are some very specific things about this country which mark you out from the rest of Europe. The rental sector, I know it's a frustration for a lot of people, but the stability there is phenomenal, and there's lots of space potentially for investment into that sector in a positive way that doesn't, create a free-for-all. Your skills, your schools, your education system, the energy sector, your natural energy sources, and that entrepreneurial thing. These are all really special things that you can nurture and share. What we've got is just a great big market. So that gives us an opportunity that you don't have. We have our own London market, and then obviously we've got the UK, which is a much bigger country. But that's where the collaboration could really come in. Of course it matters. And to your point, you're number 31 in the world. You aren't a threat to us as a global capital of finance. You're a threat to us in some of the tech sectors, definitely. You're definitely a competitor. But you're not trying to be. You're trying to be, a perfectly formed and dynamic future tech capital of Europe. So I think there's sort of two different ambitions that can work very well in tandem.
I don't know about you, but I appreciate the frankness and the straightforwardness for this. And I think
please don't. Are there any journalists here? Please don't quote anything I've said.
Former one, but yeah. And I think you've done a good job in maybe stealing some people here away from Stockholm to London. But thank you so much for your time, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you. So now instead, our next segment we call Finance as an Enabler for Transition. And to give you a bit of a framework of what we mean by that, maybe it's something that all generations have felt, but it seems like our world is on the verge of fundamental change to our societies and businesses and the financial sector. Global economies, they aim to shift from climate harmful to climate friendly and do as much sustainability as they can for people, for business, and for societies. Meanwhile, progress in AI is called the greatest evolution since the internet. I'm not the perfect one to judge if that's true or not, but that's what I hear. It should affect all companies, all sectors. In addition, we have major geopolitical change. We have aftermath from the COVID pandemic when we went from on-site to digital or hybrid workspaces. And in the center of this of the tectonic shifts is the financial sector. Our panel of experts will discuss their role in securing funds for major societal investments, along with challenges to do so, as well as keeping up with all of these changes themselves. And you see them here, who we'll talk to today. It's Jens Henriksson, CEO of Swedbank, Oskar Holén, CEO of Semvision, and Charlotte C. Monson, Head of Sustainability and Transition at BlackRock, and Erik Winter, the Head of the Nordic region for BNP Paribas. Please welcome them up on stage.
Thank you.
First, I would like to ask you if you agree with my introduction, that the business sector, finance sector, is on the verge of fundamental change or actually in the midst of it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Erik, for taking the floor.
Good topic. I mean, we did a survey with the top investors the other month, and they had to sort of list the most important topics they had. One was energy transition and the speed of it, how quickly it can happen. And then second came actually biodiversity. And when it came to just the sort of plain vanilla decarbonization, that was further down. It was sort of a done deal. So those two were, so I think it's very topical what you're bringing up.
And the energy transition, or green transition as we call it, is that the main one, would you say? Given that we have AI and all the other things I mentioned. Do you agree?
So I think that we've identified 5 mega forces where the transition to a low carbon economy is one of those mega forces. It's also the one that is the most capital intensive, which will really require the most reallocation of capital. What we have found is that it's going to be transformational. It's going to reallocate across sectors and regions and markets. We think it's going to be on par with the rise of digitalization, the rise of emerging markets as well. So it's already underway. It's already transforming sectors and markets. And we also did a survey recently where we asked investors, how do you view the transition? And almost 50% on a global base said that it is their #1 investment priority in the next 1 to 3 years.
Jens, you say that the green transition is the main one?
Well, I thought about that, and the answer would, of course, Erik is much smarter than me, so he always says yes. But then I looked on my sleeve, and I have this sort of UN Sustainable Development Goals. And one thing we need to understand that sustainability is a sort of quite a large thing. A lot of things that boils together: biodiversity, equality between sexes, money laundering, fraud. You can just paint it around. And then the really difficult question is climate change, because that's the green energy transition was all about. Is that more important than others? And that's something I'm intellectually thinking quite a lot. And to be honest, I think it is a bit more important than the others, which is very hard for me to say, but I'm still playing around with it, because in the end, this is a sort of an issue that's literally going to change the world. And that is what's in my mind. And there are a few cool things. I'm sorry for taking so much now, but
no worries.
The cool thing is that we're on the right side of history. So capital rightly done is actually doing something good. And that means that politics is now lagging behind. And we as business leaders and enablers from the capital markets, we are an important part, sort of a spearhead. And that's pretty cool.
Oscar, what do you say?
I think Jens is absolutely right what he's saying. I think the green transition that we can see in northern Sweden and is the result of private capital rather than public efforts or policy efforts. I think, from our end, we're a scale-up, we're a company. For those of you who don't know, Zenvision invented a process and a chemistry to produce fossil-free cement. And we are actually today closing our fundraising round, which is exciting. But that also means that we spend a lot of time talking to investors, which is interesting and rewarding, to put it diplomatically. And one of the things that we have come to aware is that there are a lot of VC funds and private equity funds who quite recently saw the business opportunity in green tech. And suddenly everyone wants to be in this space. Some of them have been in this space for a long time, knows which questions to understands CapEx heavy investments and the investment horizons that includes. But there's also a lot of new kids on the block who suddenly added impact investments or climate investments to their website. So I think there's a trend, and that's good. But from the capital side, I think you need to go more than just putting it on a website.
And before I continue with the experts, I'd like to invite you to join us well if you are interested to do so. You can go into this, it's actually behind of Oscar and Jens, but you see it on the big screen here. If you go into menti.com and you put in that 8-digit code, you can submit questions anonymously if you want to or not, in digital for us or for me to ask during the panel discussions. So, with that being said, I'm going to actually leave that up for a while so everybody has time to get in. Do you think, Eric, let's start with you. Do you think that the green transition, energy transition, sustainability process is moving in the right direction?
Yes. I think, and I agree with Jens that it's a full circle and so on.
You guys.
But so I will try to focus on 2 or 3 of them. I would say, first of all, when any movement starts, it starts normally with the people on the street, activists, etc., and so on. And then science kind of comes creeping, and you get 1 or 2 facts. And then slowly the regulator comes, and in a bit sort of clumsy way, and maybe a little bit too slow and so on. And last but not least, the market forces come in. And I think in some of the parts of the circle, I think the markets are starting to take the lead, and I think it's only when the market takes the lead then it's going to really happen quickly. And you're touching on some of it, but if we look at, say, for instance, green or sustainable type of financing, I think the first bond was done 2007 or 8 by the World Bank, and then you had a French company, Air Liquide, did something 2013, I think. By the way, I want to give a lot of credit to Jens and his organization, because thanks, by the way, for having us as an arranger and lead of them, but we did your first dollar green bond in 21. And this is very, very important from the point of view that I would say the common wisdom in the capital markets was that if you've issued sort of relatively low liquid bonds, i.e. structured bonds of some kind, whether they were green or sustainable, you had to pay more for them. But Swedbank managed to issue a 7-year dollar bond that actually traded through their normal senior bonds, and that was a very important sort of signal that the market forces actually took over more.
Like a milestone.
Exactly, and then you followed up. By the way, I think Swedbank was the only European bank, including BNP, who issued sterling, dollars, and euros the same year in green bonds, 2021. And then you also been in the forefront, more to your other circles on the social bonds. So late last year, we had the pleasure of working with you on the first ever Nordic bank social bond, where 100% of the proceeds went to social housing, etc., and so on. Huge success, and also breaking the mold in many ways. So yeah, I think the markets are coming.
Jens, you were kind of shaking your head in the beginning of Eric's answer there.
Well, after that flattery, I think
Yeah.
I'm quiet.
And I don't really remember what you said in the beginning. Sorry.
But then I'll step in and disagree a little bit. I mean, I think, look, we'll need around $200 trillion to reach net zero by 2050. Trillion dollars. That's a lot of zeros behind. So, and I think we are not there yet at all. Currently, we are investing around maybe 1.5 towards $2 trillion annually. That needs to increase to 4 trillion annually. So there's quite a gap there. What we're seeing is that investors are, they're committed, they're looking to increase their allocations, but they're trying to find out what are those key investment opportunities. We're seeing that there is a massive funding gap for emerging markets. You can't talk about transition without talking about emerging markets. It accounts for almost 2/3 of global emissions. The emerging markets are in what we call a slow lane for transition at the moment. The cost of capital is much higher than in developed markets. It has a growing population. It has a growing need for industrialization and growing energy demand for high carbon energy. It has also the world's largest share of hard-to-abate sectors, steel, cement, heavy industry, and so forth. So there is a massive gap there, where there's a real role for blended finance, for private capital and public capital to go together to try to lift that burden. We're also seeing that damages from climate change could go up towards detracting 5% of global GDP by 2050. Those are significant numbers. And so we are looking for services and products that can help society become much more resilient towards those damages. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities out there, and we really see it as a firm. We see it as a significant investment opportunity. There are also many risks that need to be studied very closely. But I think that this is the moment for the financial sector to really step up and move all energy, excuse the pun, but all energy in the right direction. And it cannot go fast enough.
Oscar, I think it's interesting to hear your thoughts here, given your side of receiving funds for your business. How do you think that professional investors and lenders are keeping up with this obviously huge demand for capital and financing, as Charles is mentioning?
I think when you look at our journey, most of our funding actually comes from the US, where we have Breakthrough Energy, which is, I guess, part of typically Bill Gates' money, but also other type funds from his structures. I don't know how it works, but Breakthrough Energy essentially funded all of our R&D side, which is quite interesting and counterintuitive when you think about us as a Swedish startup coming from incubators in Kalmar originally. That it actually US funds supporting us. I think when you look at our access to capital, it's somewhere a line between, a lot of investors are more comfortable and used to seeing another app, another SaaS investment, which is easy. You understand that ecosystem. You see the cost drivers is essentially more cloud capacity.
And not so
now I'm obviously generalizing quite a lot. And then you have a few where you have obviously Northvolt and H2 Green Steel being at the forefront, mega capex intensive. What we're doing is also very capex intensive, although at a smaller scale compared to those two projects. And from an investor side, I think it's about finding that type of blended financing, as you mentioned, the non-dilutive capital, the grants from EU and other public institutions, and also obviously finance from capital markets, whether it's bond financing or traditional project financing, and it's sort of. It's a very complex landscape. I don't think you should underestimate the capacity and knowledge you need to have as a company entering into that and sitting across the conference table with dragons such as you, asking questions. You need to have a financial model which holds water. And I think it was Peter Carlson at Northvolt who at one point said that one of the biggest innovations around Northvolt was actually its financing. So it is a challenge.
Jens, you wanted to...
I just want to go a bit further up, and I would say, like, what was it, 15 years ago we talked about Stockholm as the financial market center, and we talked a lot about that, and then the global financial crisis came and nobody moved up to Frihamnen and things like that. So, but when I see sort of, we're talking today about the capital of finance. Andreas, next year maybe the sustainable capital of finance or capital of sustainable finance, something like that, because we are ahead of the curve here and there are money to make. And I'm sorry for alluding to the previous speaker, but if you're an Azerbaijan oil company, do not come to Sweden.
Speaking of which, I just want to take one... you can applaud, it's okay. One question from the audience as well. Regarding the ESG position of the market, how does that affect the communication needs? Should companies leverage their work to highlight ESG reputation for Stockholm, Sweden?
I think everybody is, of course, scared to get into sort of a problem where it's greenwashing. But this is an area where things are moving. We just published our annual accounts and together with the sustainability report. And if you look on the tables, it's going to be a lot of blacked out boxes because we're not there yet. And we need to understand when we take steps forward, there are things we will get wrong. And when you look at not me, but the SEB, they say, okay, let's measure this. And then they say, okay, but that might change. And we need to be open about that and talk about it. And the difficult thing is sort of, it's not taking something that's light green and going to dark green. It's something taking light brown and making it light green. The dark black brown or black brown, I don't know, but avoid that. But the thing is, put in your effort and move the scale. That's when you can make a difference. But that's communicatively extremely difficult to say that, okay, these things we're not doing, we're here to transform them. But that company is giving out polluting that and that. Well, we're going to change it to that. And that's the tricky part in communication.
I think maybe to add something to that, because I really agree with you there. I think there has been a step away from the ESG term because there's a need to be much more granular, much more specific. Like, what is it actually that we're talking about? Are we talking about carbon emissions? Are we talking about, DEI indicators? Are we talking about biodiversity? What exactly is it? And I think that if you as a company, if you can be much more clear on, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What is it that you are measuring? Where is that year-on-year progress? And you can really back that up with some solid numbers and so forth, then you shouldn't be so worried about the greenwashing part, actually, because I think there is a general acceptance now that you might be high carbon today, but if you're moving in the right transition path, if you have some solid CapEx, green CapEx plans, you have some solid, disclosures around your emissions levels, then investors will generally be very interested in that transition journey, and they would like to go with you on that journey.
Eric?
No, I agree, and I don't know if anyone went to EQT's first Capital Markets Day yesterday. It was extremely impressive. They have, I think, 230, 240 billion assets under management, and they spent quite a lot of time on the different parts of the circle, but also around sustainability. And they simply said, we do it because it's good business. And I think. And that comes back to when the market starts. I mean, they are the most market brutal people you can think about, and it actually is good business, and they show better yields and so on. Of course, it means that not all the projects will be successful, but it is actually a good business for investors and obviously also ultimately for the society.
Anyone from EQT in the audience who wants to reply? No, everybody's happy. Okay, good. But I also want to touch upon what you said, Jens, and Charlotte as well. It's usually consensus, as I understand it, within the financial sector to still supply loans to brown or light brown to transition them from light brown or black brown to green or greener, at least.
No, you have to say stop for a few things. And we've said we're not going to do, and I can just keep on, we have like tons of things we're not going to do. But there are things we'll do when we go in there, not the best company in all terms, but they have a viable plan in order to meet the Paris Agreement or move the needle in the right direction. That is where I think you can make the biggest impact. And the thing with finance is that we're just an enabler. In the end, we're pretty boring. The cool thing, he's doing the cool thing. That's changing the world. What we can do is take the hard-earned money from depositors and lend it out, provided that they pay them back. That's what the bank does, being there. And then when you get up and get the awards, then we move back and move to the next one. That is the very point.
Oscar, do you feel like the cool one?
You should wear a T-shirt.
Finally, I feel like the cool one. It took me 40 years.
You're not alone.
I think you're right describing that as well. And then the question goes to when do you get access to that capital? Like how do you do it, the process for that, and the risk appetite. And how do you break that down and share the risk so that you are able to finance, first of a kind infrastructure, because it is extremely expensive and we can't just risk taxpayers' money for everything. We need... It needs to be a sort of a shared structure somehow, which goes sort of back to what we talked about earlier about the blended capital and that.
And is that how you work too? Kind of share the risk of the investments?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of these private to public, whether you look at Northvolt, H2 Green Steel, IRA, etc., you normally have some agency money there also, NIB, EIB, SEK, Riksgälden, etc. But by the way, back to your Brown question, one, I think there are a few steps, and so for instance, we exited tobacco, anything with oil, coal, etc. 2016, and then we only 5-7 years ago, I think we were number 8 lender in the world to the fossil industry. Today we are off the league tables. We committed to by 2030 to have only max 10% of the total assets in something that produce some kind of carbon, and that's by far the most aggressive goal by any bank. But then we also, so we have one. You have to look at yourself. What are you doing? In our case, we became then carbon neutral 2017. Then secondly, you have to make decisions. Who are you going to transition with, and who are you going to exit brutally? And we had to make some decisions. And then it's the new ones, how much risk are we, and what we actually said, and don't use it against me, but we said that by next year we are going to be involved in direct lending, 40 billion worth of euros, and that's going to go towards 200 billion by 2030 in renewable innovative projects, where actually we are taking some pure risk. We are going to syndicate some of that risk. But then it's also about the established ones, because whether you like it or not, we still need oil. And what we do there clearly today, if some of the oil majors come to us and they want to do what Swedbank has done, a green bond, we can consider that as long as they earmark the money completely to renewable product. But we had situations with very well-known names where they say, no, we are not letting you micromanage, then we are giving back the mandate. So I think you need to be quite, we are coming to the point where you need to be quite tough on the ones who are not willing to play.
And this is also something I find is interesting, because according to a McKinsey report, green tech, let's call it, is 6 times as capital intense as existing technology. Which means, and as you mentioned too, Charlotte, there's a huge need. It's vast amounts of money that needs to be invested. In the meantime, as lenders, professional investors, or institutional investors, you are regulated, or you can't take as much risk as it might be with this new untested technology. Is there a dilemma here to see a good idea and want to engage, but it doesn't really fit the risk profile?
I think I just want to go back to the blended finance thing, because I do think that offers a really interesting opportunity for investors, because you asked before, there is a high risk or potential high risk when you are investing in new technologies and so forth, and who is willing to take that initial high risk? Well, and that is where government funding comes in. So a couple of years ago we launched capital finance partnerships together with the governments of France, Germany and Japan, and it's all about investing into climate infrastructure projects in emerging markets. We have almost 800 million now in that vehicle, and it's investing in wind farms in Kenya, it's investing in grids in Brazil and so on and so forth. So I think when you have governments that come in and say, we're willing to take that that first hit, so to speak, or that initial risk, that makes institutional investors, private investors, more comfortable to go into that space as well. So I think it's, you know, we try to facilitate that because there is a need for investing in the startups. And I think, you know, before you talked about all the new kids on the block, and there are many of them, but what's actually missing is the middle part, right? New kids on the block, big, you know, infrastructure kind of organizations, and there is a need for financing and investing in those companies that are looking to scale up their decarbonization technologies and infrastructure and so on. And that's another risk space where I think it's quite well suited for long-term investors that are looking to, you know, really that long horizon where they're not looking for a return tomorrow or next year, but rather in 30, 40 years, and very much also for government funding.
Could add one thing is that we're not a VC company, we're a bank. And that means that what we do is that we take the hard-earned depositors' money and then we need to make sure we get it back. So that's what we do. It's not our money we're sort of using to channel in between. What we can do, and sometimes we tend to forget, are the ordinary Swedes, Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians that need a solar pump, a solar panel, or a heat pump, or insulation. That's a huge opportunity where we see as a sort of the bank for the many people in those 4 countries. That's where we see we actually could have the biggest impact through ordinary people raising the value of their house by investing into new green stuff.
But do you agree with Charlotte that there are room here for state government support to kind of fill that void, since you're not a VC company and the VC companies doesn't have all the funds that's needed?
It's always easy to sort of scream for the state to come in. I want them to have stable rules that in the end promote those who do the right thing. I mean, I'm not going to scream for government subsidies. I've been on the other side, and I don't like that.
What I would say, that's good to hear from a social democrat. Or you used
banker.
to be.
I used to.
No, that's okay.
I'm sort of.
No,
I'm
but you are actually taking risk because you own a big pension company. And they invest in stuff that
but that
also
pension
takes risk on
that
the equities
company,
and so on.
so you should
I know, but we have the same, and we have our energy transition fund, etc. But by the way, it's interesting on the public-private. So, for instance, Norges is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, 1.6 trillion. Ironically, it's been coming from oil, and now they sort of invest in only in public listed companies. But they are now going to the government to be able to start investing. So you should go. Peter Carlson met with Nicolai Tangen. You need to go there because I think that's the type of money. I mean, one, you could argue that the Norwegians have a bit of a bad conscience because the money comes from oil and they have to make good. So I would really encourage them to take more risk. And also when we talk about our type of risk, I think we've been heavily involved in Northvolt and H2 Green Steel arranged their 2 biggest financings recently. We are taking some risk there, and I completely agree that the bank normally shouldn't take sort of classic risk because that's not what our shareholders want. But we do it by underwriting, structuring, and then sharing that risk with people who are willing to take more risk. So we are putting our money where the mouth is to some extent.
Let me just check if there's someone in the room who wants to ask a question. If you do, raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone to you. Molly will bring a microphone. Is everybody happy? Okay, let's take one then. It was submitted digitally. How can legislation aid to accelerate the transition and generate even more capital? Anyone feels they're an expert in legislation?
what legislation? It sounds like your field.
No, I'm not. But I'm happy to comment on it. No, I mean, I think legislation can be both a carrot and a stick, right? It can very much create incentives for investors and for corporates as well. I mean, we've seen what the Inflation Reduction Act has done in the US for really, lifting up the renewable sector, but also what Repower EU is doing in Europe here as well. So we're seeing that creates those types of incentives, which is enabling the lowering the cost of new technologies, the development of those, and it's also creating more innovation. It can also create a stick because we're seeing that regulation is holding back. There's a lot of red tape. It takes a long time to get permitting. It takes a long time to get the right papers in order to really build all the different climate infrastructure as well. So I think it's both an enabler and it can also be, you know, holding you back. But I think we've seen a lot of different standardized reporting frameworks come into play, and that's why I laughed a little bit, because I think, you know, everybody that's worked with those knows that it can be quite burdensome as well. So I think what we're looking for is a standardization and maybe also a slimming down of the number of reporting frameworks that are out there, and maybe going for more of a global standard.
So if I tend to think it, I would say that the government, what they can do is they can make sure that the external costs are visible. And in carbon, you can do for a carbon dioxide tax or cap and trade on the one side. Then they can come with regulation. And my attitude towards regulation, it's a bit like with love. If you do not get who you love, you have to love who you get. Is that how you say it?
I have no idea.
The key point. The key point is the following.
We need to talk to your wife.
Well, in my case, it was the same. No, but the key point is the following: that regulation is done by great people trying to do the best. There are literally tons of problems they are trying to find solutions of. And they do that with good attitude and some of the brightest people you see in bureaucracies and governments and the European Commission. Then it's complicated when you do it and have unintended consequences. I think what we need to do as the financial sector is to embrace regulation. It's there. Love it. Do the best. Within this structure, try to do your best within it. Because 100 bureaucrats in Brussels changes the world. Look at GDPR. I mean, how many 10 bureaucrats in Brussels change the whole world? Things can happen here the same. And they are looking for solutions that are going to make us more sustainable.
Oscar?
I think rules and regulations are very important. Stop subsidizing CO2 emissions is perhaps one of the most important. But then, you know, as from our perspective, having foreseeable rules is important to be able to attract capital for Sweden to be a stable jurisdiction. I think the challenge with public capital is that as obviously a smaller company, we move fast, and being entangled in these extremely long processes that is typically required from a public financing side is challenging. It takes too much time to access that capital, and that is a problem. So I think what we've seen on EU level, I believe Breakthrough Energy has partnered with EIB to do 800 million euros, I believe, joint investments where Breakthrough Energy catalysts move forward and then EIB do a co-investment. I think that type of structure where you can sort of cross-pollinate with a fast-moving player who can do proper DD, obviously look at the financials and everything, and then you combine that with additional capital from the public side. I think those types of structures is perhaps what you need to look at and encourage more.
And let me ask you too, if you agree or disagree, if you're on Team Charlotte or Team Jens with state-backed funding in early stages or to take away some of that risk.
Again, I think the challenge is that everything that comes from a public side is prone to lobbying efforts and other types of efforts, which doesn't necessarily fund the best, quote unquote, technology. And how do you safeguard from that? I don't know. I don't think it's a clear-cut answer whether you're on one side or not. I think it depends on the use case and the problems that you're trying to solve. Clear, foreseeable rules that is visible for everybody, but putting all the trust on the public side, then it's simply not going to happen, or it will just take too long time.
I just want to clarify one thing. I don't want to be grouped into the Camp Charlotte that only talks about public finance. What I said was it's a blended finance, right, where you go together. So there's a significant role for private markets here, and we're seeing that there is a big appetite from investors as well. You know, we're building out our private markets platform only on transition investing, and so there are a lot of different opportunities depending on your risk profile, depending on your appetite for where you want to allocate into. So yeah, I just want to clarify that bit. I'm not flying
I'm also going to clarify on the other side. Of course, there is a rule for government to make sure that everything works.
You're so diplomatic, Eric.
No, but I mean, look what the US are doing with IRA. And that's, I mean, I think that's brutal subsidy that doesn't help, etc. But I think if there's an infrastructure element, particularly where you can discuss some of the projects in the north, I think that's where state and public institutions need to be involved together with private capital.
Okay, everyone, our time is running out, so let me just ask you a final question I want an answer from all of you. Could there be more collaboration within the sector and or other parties, public authorities if you wish, to further this transition pace or see more progress?
You cannot say anything but
Yeah.
Yes,
100%
yes, definitely.
We want to see more.
With who?
Yeah. Everyone and their mothers.
Well, the capital of sustainable finance. This is an opportunity for Sweden. It's an opportunity for the Nordics. It is an opportunity for the world. Because if we are sustainable, we're going to be profitable.
And put your money where your mouth is.
Yep.
Show us that you are more than just updating your website, but actually doing investments and supporting companies that are trying to make a change. I think that is super important.
I think that was a good final word. Let's say thank you to the panel for this session. And time for our next segment, which we have called the Quest for Innovation. You will hear from 7 speakers, but they're only given 8 minutes maximum to speak. And I will sit in the front row and I'll stand up if the time is out. So it will only be 8 minutes per speaker. And to kind of frame the subject for you, this is how we see the Quest for Innovation theme, that in a highly competitive and ever-changing world, the business and financial sector highlights the importance of innovation. Historically, Sweden has ranked among top European nations when it comes to innovation. But it can be applied to so much today. It's not only technologically leaps. It is products, services, leadership, or investment strategies for that matter. So during this segment, each speaker talks about a topic of their choice to inspire you or educate about innovative actions to apply or mimic from others, maybe when it comes to the financial sector. So our first speaker, she is the CEO of Norwegian bank giant DNB, the Swedish branch. She has over 30 years of experience from financial sector, and she is dedicated to make both business and people thrive. And today, she has chosen to talk about leadership. So please welcome Elisabeth Beskov.
Thank you. Great to be here. Did you know that around 25% of the world economy consists of companies within the financial sector industry? Our sector plays a crucial role for several reasons. Capital allocation in order to push for the green transition, global trade and investment. We create wealth and contribute to long-term economic stability. And we are great at managing risk. Or are we really? Stockholm is Northern Europe's financial center, and we have thousands of professionals working within the financial industry, closing transactions, investing in the future, and managing risk. But which risk is the one that we need to manage better if we intend to secure Stockholm as a thriving financial center? How do we make sure that we don't remain unchanged and fail to progress? The answer is leadership. An inclusive, innovative, and future-proof leadership. We need to explore new ideas, methods, and approaches, pushing the boundaries of existing norms to bring about positive change. We need to keep up and make sure we can deliver what our clients and partners expect, but also beyond those expectations. And yes, it is a huge risk if we don't. So how do we then manage this massive risk? Or the question is rather, how do you foster a collaborative and innovative culture in one of the most conventional industries? Because let's be honest, no one think we are cool or even retro. They all think we are Jurassic. So how do we then make sure we're not working in prehistoric ways? I'm convinced that if we challenge ourselves to lead our teams in a way that makes room for 3 important things, we can succeed. We need diversity of thought. We need to collaborate and exchange ideas. And you need to make sure that you create a learning environment. Diversity of thought is essential for promoting innovation, making better decisions, and improve overall performance. To build a dynamic and diverse team in the financial industry, you need to make that your top priority. We have a long history of homogeneous team, and to get rid of structural challenges takes time. The past years, I have made it my mission to make sure that DNB is a workplace that values and respects the unique perspective of different individuals. I have strived towards a workplace where you can find people with varied backgrounds in terms of gender, religion, ethnicity, and age. This is being done through different types of initiatives, training, recruitment methods, voluntary work for employees, and simply by building an inclusive culture. Creating that environment is crucial and has helped us to succeed and be a more profitable company. And not least, we have also managed to attract and keep top talent. Let's move on to collaboration, which I think some of the previous speakers also discussed and how difficult it is. Sweden is one of the leading countries in the world when it comes to innovation. So how come it's so that we are so afraid of working together in this industry? Yes, you would say it's competition law, it's bank secrecy. Yes, I know, but let us think beyond that. We need to strengthen each other. We need to exchange ideas. We have a couple of success stories, such as Swish and BankID, but we need more, much more. If I have an idea, and you have an idea, and we exchange those ideas, suddenly we have 2 ideas each instead of 1. We need to put competition aside and start collaborating. It's okay if you don't have all the solutions, but it will be easier to find the solutions together. And finally, learning. Never forget to keep investing in your most valuable asset, your employees. We need to create and maintain a learning organization. This is key to achieve a solid, sustainable organization and long-term success. The world is changing faster than ever, and you can't be a know-it-all. You need to be a learn-it-all. We all do. For us, that has meant making sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to crucial topics. AI is a good example. We were quick on embracing AI, getting tools and educating staff. So this year, all DNB staff has an AI goal as part of their personal development. This contributes to everyone's personal growth, and it makes us more competitive. It's a win-win. So, to sum up, the clock is ticking, and we need to drop our prehistoric image. If you're a leader in the financial industry and not already dedicating a substantial amount of your time to diversity, collaboration, and learning, I advise you to get started now. If you already started, please get in touch and let's exchange some ideas. Let us make Stockholm the capital of finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for starting us off. So we have this one question I want to ask all the speakers in this segment. We would like to create a wish list. So what would you like to add to the wish list of an innovation wish list to make Stockholm or make Stockholm remain a thriving financial center?
I would say that we need to collaborate more, and I would like to wish to have a forum for that kind of talk amongst each other in the financial industry.
Okay, collaboration and forum. Good, we write that up on the wish list. Thank you so much, Elizabeth Beskov. Our next speaker then is Anna Fellander. She's the founder of Ank AI, a responsible AI governance platform. She's passionate about making meaning from data, and she's previously been head of financial analysis at Crisis Management Office at the Prime Minister in Sweden during the financial crisis in 2008. Today, she will speak about AI and ethics. Please welcome Anna Fellander.
Thank you. It's great to be here. So for many years, I studied how digitalization is affecting productivity. So there has been, for all these years, a productivity paradox, meaning that we experience a lot of value from digitalization, but there's no sign in the official statistics. Now, there are many reasons for this. You can measure it. You don't have the capacity or the right skill set to measure it properly due to new business models. There's also a lot of double work in organizations. You have a digital process and you do it manual. And there's also lagging in organizational culture. When it comes to AI, before Gen AI revolutionized the financial sector and all our lives, there was a tech silo sentiment where in the tech AI silo, it was not what should AI do, it was about what can AI do. So no return on investment requirements and no guardrails. This led to 80% of everything that was done inside the tech team never reached deployment. And if it reached deployment, only 60% was cost productive. So the entire world is changing now and has changed last year. I cannot begin to explain the general purpose technology potential in Gen AI, complementing specific and narrow AI. Gen AI is different from specific narrow AI due to three things, and the last being the most important. Number one, it creates content. Number two, it is general content, not only credit scoring or churn prediction. Number three, the barrier to entry for us using code is drastically lowered. This has the potential, so I'm a productivity nerd. This has the potential to boost global GDP with 7%. In this room, we all know that productivity is a good thing, right? Job creation, inflationary pressures goes down. This 7% is due to labor productivity hikes. Time efficiency, so 55% time reduction in writing code. 50% time reduction in accountants and tax accountant, etc. 45% in time efficiency, time saving in creative writings. This is a biggie. Now, how are we going to make this happen? Because it will happen, but the cities and the nations that will make it happen are the ones that have these two challenges in mind and encourage or are able to overcome them. Number one, it is about organizational culture and incentive structures. Do Gen AI, take my job or make me be better at my job performance tasks? Will Gen AI make my task higher up the value chain so I can use more capacity to what AI cannot do? What can AI not do? What is so unique about our humans? Collaborative skills, empathy, creativity, innovation, patience, and intuition. That's one thing to ask your organizational cultures and incentives. Is this a threat to your employer, or will it augment them? The second challenge, and this is what I've been doing since I left Swedbank as chief economist, since 2016, I've been engaged in how organizations manage to secure their ethical values and principles within their AI solutions. Now, trust is about ensuring that our human rights are upheld, right? It's a no-brainer, but I'll tell you, all of our human rights are at the moment violated. AI projects are delivering misguided outcomes due to bias in data, algorithms, and teams responsible for managing them. So, as I said, AI has been developed in isolated silos without any awareness to contextualize the risk landscape. So how do you code your ethical principles? Now, fairness means something for the tech team, something for the legal team, and something for the operations and business team. At the moment, crucial business decisions are taken by the tech team. Ethical trade-offs are made without any alignments with compliance and business teams. So how do we make a cross-orchestration to align the tech, business, and legal perspectives on, for example, when does a recommendation engine become unethical nudging? How smart can a city become without intruding our privacy? So, going from that, the more we know and learn about AI, the more we learn about the human brain. There's been of course, it's a US executive teams or executive survey, but there has not been any such survey in Stockholm. But executives in the US agree that 70% of these US executives agree that soft skills are more important than AI skills. And you can look at it as a supply shock of the left brain side. There's a supply shock of intelligence, right? Not wisdom, not experience, not intuition. But there is a supply shock of intelligence, right? So what happens when there's a supply shock? The value goes down, right? So what do we value? And how can this productivity paradox be broken? It's how we let our human skills be in a safe environment, safe for curiosity, safe for risk-taking. But I am certain that Stockholm have three things that will make this capital and critical mass of innovation outlead the rest of the world. We have experience of combining values with sustainable business models. We have low hierarchy and flat organizations.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was waiting for you all the time. I was
but we have
wasting your time with some.
we have to stop now to keeping the time. Thank you so much. I would like to ask you that question as well.
So I'm all about AI, right? But there's no AI in innovations humans can trust, right? It's all about humans,
right?
Yeah, and we can have as many. It's how we treat it.
And is that also on your innovative wish list then for Stockholm? More humans?
No, but I mean the collaborating part of Elisabeth's talk is crucial here. Critical thinking. What if you can have 90% of your job task just on analyzing and critical thinking among your peers? What will happen?
Much more time.
Nej. The productivity, stupid. It's the productivity. Ja, nu ska jag sluta.
Okay, super. Thank you so much, Anna.
Tack.
Food for thought, and we're only about a quarter through this session. The next speaker is Darja Isaksson. She is the General Director of the Swedish Innovation Authority, Vinnova. She has expressed innovation is an existential issue, and in that short amount of time we have to adjust to a sustainable society, it requires new ways of working for everyone. Darja has extensive background in tech industry, and she's also a member of the advisory group for digitalization to the government. Today, she has chosen to talk about innovation in a changing world. Please welcome Darja Isaksson.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks a lot. So, yeah, let's get started. Innovation, in the meaning of the word, radically improved technology, product, business model, way of working, is the driver for prosperity in Sweden and the world, and has been. Innovation systems, then, in the meaning of the ecosystems, consisting of the entrepreneurs and the investors, the multinationals and the other societal stakeholders that together provide the necessary competence, the infrastructure, the opportunities to try out new ideas. The dance between supply and demand of innovation, the quality and the density of that ecosystem is what makes a country successful. It really does take a village to raise a child. So let me start by saying thank you for being a great village, because Sweden is truly a leader in innovation. So innovation has always been crucial for competitiveness, and now, as you heard in the intro, I would say that innovation is even existential. Diane Driscoll, she's the CEO of the US federal government agency FEMA, tasked with helping people before, during, and after a disaster, like the Swedish MSB. And she told me last year, she said, "We used to have seasons, hurricane seasons, fire seasons. We don't anymore. We're now operating in a perpetual state of crisis." Her words were ringing in my ears as I looked through the numbers of what extreme weather events cost in the US in 2023. There were 28 unique extreme weather events, each costing more than $1 billion, totaling at $92 billion cost of destruction due to floods, fires, storms, aggregated since 2019, a total of a staggering $600 billion. So I have to ask myself, are we still underestimating the risk and cost of acting too late and too little? Or are we accepting the very hard scientific fact that we're working towards hard deadlines now? These deadlines are set by the planet. We cannot negotiate with the planet. We must adapt. We must transform. We need to drive every single value chain, every city, every consumption pattern to lie within planetary boundaries, including biodiversity. And the good news, though, is that when we do that, we can also build a ton of value. In fact, Sweden is already a leader in that sense. Just looking back into 2023, the Swedish startups drew an additional 4.7 billion euros in VC investments, 75% of which went to impact startups. Stockholm is a leading impact hub to the world, bringing value and solutions to the challenges that we have. That's key to our attractiveness. That's also key to bringing out new companies that actually address real problems and needs in the world. That's more important than ever. Also for other reasons. We need to talk about resilience and security. We lived through the pandemic and we saw the supply chains shocks happen. And yes, they were due to lockdowns, factories standing still, trucks not driving, etc., and extreme weather, and cyber attacks on crucial trade nodes, and global tensions leading to trade obstacles, preventing open trade. Which one of these factors would you assume we will see less of in the future? We might get a break in the pandemics. The other ones are more likely to increase. We're already seeing the attacks in the Black Sea impacting global trade, right? We're seeing a surge in cyber attacks on companies, on institutions, on infrastructure. So it's completely understandable and entirely necessary for multinational states and regions to now focus on building resilient supply chains in critical new industries. Let's say we really want to keep having access to food, to chips. We need batteries. And these new strategic industries are therefore now being built in record time in some parts of the world. In the US, if we're looking at investments in new manufacturing constructions, it was at a record high, plus $200 billion US in 2023. That's a multiple of what it was just a few years ago. Those new strategic supply chains that will come out of these efforts are built on new technologies and innovation. It's a huge technology shift that's going on. And these technologies themselves are going really fast. So innovation policy plays an important role here. And AI, as we know, I mean, doesn't need to be said, is a game changer for all of us. So it's not just about Klarna's customer service efficiency, although that's great and impressive. AI is making it possible to analyze, predict, model, explore, design, implement radically new ways in new materials, in life science, precision medicine, in regtech, fintech, in ways that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. AI is changing the way society works as we speak. You'll hear more about it from others, but let's just put it this way. There are now GPT stores that make it possible for literally anyone to fine-tune AI models for specific purposes through drag and drop. That's how easy it is right now. So remember how the mobile app stores that were launched in 2008 had kind of an impact on business and industry? It's measured now in the hundreds of billions of dollars, projected towards $1 trillion industry in 2030s. It changed consumer behaviors, it changed business in a number of ways, mobile payments, Uber, TikTok. For AI, the effects will be vastly larger. It's happening now. The super election year 2024, more than half of the world's population electing new leaders in the 1 year where any high schooler can create perfectly realistic deepfakes. Great. Technology has always been a double-edged sword. It will always be. But as Peter Drucker said, the best way to predict the future is to choose to create it. We're living in a time of transformation. When we combine AI with other new exponential technologies such as next generation communications, quantum computing, synthetic biology, we are the generation with unprecedented opportunity to really disrupt and transform everything in how we produce anything from food, the clothes we eat, how we transport stuff, how we live, the medicine that saves lives, the weapons that kill. This is why innovation is existential. It's also because technological supremacy has always been, maybe we forgot about that, translating into global power. US knows it, they invest. China knows it, invests heavily. The EU, to be able to stay competitive and relevant and secure, we need to double down on our innovation efforts. We need to keep strengthening the incentives to take that step from the university lab out of an organization to build something new. We need to invest together in the super expensive, unfortunately, advanced infrastructure, because this is kind of material sports that can lower the thresholds for many to try out new ideas, because we will not shut down factories to try out one idea. We need to challenge each other to really drive the markets we need to accelerate this. We need to have loads of risk-willing customers in industry and in the public sector. We need to figure out how to ensure enough patient, risk-willing capital for these deep tech startups to grow in Sweden and Europe, because they cannot really right now. We're feeding other markets with talent and great ideas. We really could and should innovate how we work with policy, ensuring that policy, when it's implemented, it's done in a way that facilitates and encourages innovation. We cannot just only be a region that regulates AI. It needs to be done in a way that stimulates innovation. Regulatory sandboxes would be key. And then, so if we then accept innovation is not nice to have, it's absolutely essential. It's neither is it neutral. What directionality we give it, what kind of solutions we choose to invest in is actually what kind of future we bet on and help bring together. So as the Swedish Innovation Agency, we're here to enable it, support the experiments, but only together as an ecosystem can we be more ambitious, more impactful. So thanks for having me. I hope to listen more.
And you know what question I'm going to ask? What's on your wish list, on the innovative wish list for Stockholm to be a thriving financial center?
Yeah, well, I love Stockholm. I think we're great. But yeah, I would second the message of diversity, of collaboration, but also cross-sector. Like speaking as a government agency representative, then, if we really want to change how policy is being implemented, we need to kind of make our voices heard together and figure it out. And I would say the finance inspection was kind of one of the front runners in terms of government agencies. So regulatory sandboxes, you guys help me bring the message. But I think, and I know that also in the world around us, there are new tools that enable a much, much closer collaboration that makes it possible to implement new solutions as a way of figuring out how to implement policy as well. So I think that would be kind of a good thing. And I see countries that are making moves there that makes them really good.
So I learned a new word today, regulatory sandbox. Yep. Thank you so much, Dr. Saxon. Our speakers are pushing the time limit, so let me throw us into the next speaker, which is Anders Jakobsson. He's a very active and experienced investor, growth investor, today representing 7 districts. He has founded and operated several investment platforms in the past, and throughout his career he has acted as investor and advisor to startup, growth companies, large multinational companies on strategy, value creation, M&A, and financing. Today we'll talk about ingenuity, the quality of clever, original, and inventive. So please welcome Anders Jakobsson.
Hi everyone, glad to be here. I want to start by this quest for innovation with a quote from 1946, which I use quite a bit. So, to move from the old to what is about to come is the only tradition worth keeping. And I think that's something to keep in mind when talking about innovation. So I'm very glad to stand here in front of you, an impressive, multifaceted crowd who can all contribute quite a bit to innovation. My ambition today is to break down innovation into several elements, starting with ingenuity. Hopefully inspiring you to be able to take a couple of actions after this. I also want to give my view on how an investor can contribute to innovation in addition to actually investing capital in innovation. So, ingenuity, uppfinningsrikedom in Swedish. In my world, is that a core pillar and starting point for all types of innovation. Most of us have a picture in mind, connecting ingenuity with a crazy inventor. Do we believe that this is really a type of character that will drive long-term, systemic, sustainable innovation that redefines the future? I don't. My starting point for innovation is a trinity, where ingenuity is the starting point. To ingenuity, you have to add technology and entrepreneurship. When you have those 3 elements, this trinity, with a rightly managed approach, nurtured in the right way, together with capital investments and experience, that can defy the traditional linear innovation trajectory. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of 7 District, an investment company. We have taken a new approach where we all, in addition to making investments, also want to inspire others to engage in finding new ways, facilitating different perspectives, the trinity of ingenuity, technology, entrepreneurship, and ultimately accelerate innovation. So, that said, how do we, business and finance individuals, contribute to a more thriving innovation scene in practice? Well, over the last years, I'm sure that most of you have been through a roller coaster ride. That started with the heydays in 2020 after COVID, with a real spike, and then into a steel bath in 2022, 2023, and even in the beginning of this year. I believe that this steel bath has been even so very important for innovation, because it has created a lot of pressure of the quality of innovation. From the heydays, more or less all types of innovation got funding, could accelerate, and could live for quite some time. Now, when capital is more scarce, experience is more scarce, there's a much higher mark to be able to get funding and to accelerate your innovation. I believe that this is a clear example of the trinity: ingenuity, technology, and entrepreneurship. It's not enough with one of them to succeed and survive. You have to have all 3 of them. So now we're coming to a point where we all have to contribute to shift gears and mindset, because now we really need to invest in innovation again, real innovation. So we're all responsible to collectively come together from our respective perspectives and starting points, if we should not slow down the much needed pace of innovation for our future society. My starting point and philosophy as an investor, I think the most important part is to channel capital and resources, coordinate this trinity that I keep talking about, and combine what we see here today, which is large corporates, it's innovative early stage companies, and also a lot of other stakeholders that together come together and discuss innovation from various perspectives. It's the synergy between these elements and stakeholders that will fuel the extraordinary leaps that we need for the future. So that is the role that I as an individual and 7 District as an organization are trying to take. We always ask ourselves, what can we do to spur one or several elements in the trinity, or contribute by bringing together facilitating factors. So, in conclusion, the quest for innovation is not a straightforward journey. It's a complex, exhilarating voyage, and I hope that I today, now and after, if you want to talk, have provided some perspectives around it that makes you interested in innovation from an investor's perspective, and that you understand that it's more than a financial investment or a technological advancement. Innovation, a real innovation, requires a new way of thinking, a collaborative spirit. We've heard a lot about collaboration today. And it also requires commitments to explore uncharted territories. It basically demands all of us to embrace and encourage the trinity of ingenuity, applying new technologies, and encourage entrepreneurship. And, not the least, to act. And that's something all of us can do. Innovation will indeed change everything we do, but it's not as simple as flipping a switch. It's about making a commitment to long-term, continuous and systemic exploration, to learning and to imagining what is possible. So, together, let us embark on this quest for innovation, For in the synergy in our efforts lies the power to redefine the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anders. And I would like to hear, and I would like to hear you say something different than collaboration, because we heard that from the three others. What's on your wish list?
Well, we heard forum before, but I genuinely believe creating forums for this type of discussion is very important. So basically bring together different types of organizations, people with various backgrounds and so on, for a discussion around this topic. So that type of forum, like we have today.
I was going to say, so you want more of this?
Yes, more of this. Absolutely more of this.
Thank you so much, Anders
Thank
Jakobsson.
you.
And we're moving on. Our next speaker is Anna Wikland. She's the Country Director of Sweden for Google. She has a background in tech, but she's been with Google since 2016, and she calls herself a tech optimist. Today, she will talk about the AI revolution, innovation, and creativity connected to it. Please welcome Anna Wikland.
Great to be here. 2024 is a special year for Google in Sweden because we celebrate our 20th anniversary here this year. And as a country director for the past 8 years, I witnessed the transformative power of technology firsthand. And I can say that I think this is the most exciting time yet. At Google Sweden, we're dedicated of being a knowledge partner helping Sweden, its people, its businesses, and society as a whole unlock the incredible opportunities that digitalization and AI provide. And that's also what brings me here today, to share some thoughts specifically on AI and its role in driving innovation. For over 25 years, Google globally has offered products and services that organize the world's information and makes it accessible and useful. Today, thanks to technological advancements, we have this knowledge at our fingertips. And I think it's fair to say that the past 30 years have been absolutely revolutionary. However, from my and from Google's perspective, this is only the beginning. We are on the brink of something much bigger and something that we are convinced is an area of unprecedented opportunities. In 2016, when Sundar Pichai announced that Google is an AI-first company, it was probably very unclear for anyone not in the tech industry what it actually meant. But for over a decade, we have used AI to really improve our products. It's the reason why Google Translate keeps getting better at helping people understand one another. And it's how Google Maps finds you the best route, even suggesting the most eco-friendly options. So today we see AI as the most important catalyst to continue to enabling our mission. And it's still early days, but the transformative power of AI is undeniable. And it's not just about making products better. It's about how AI can be used to tackle big societal issues through extraordinary innovation. One of my favorite examples is how Google DeepMind, with the help of AlphaFold, has mapped the building blocks of life, namely proteins. When working in disease research, you need to understand the 3D structure of proteins, and there are over 200 million known to science. Before AlphaFold existed, about 175,000 proteins have been identified by scientists. And it usually takes one PhD student over 5 years to identify the structure of one protein. Using AlphaFold, we mapped the 3D structure of 200 million proteins and delivered the equivalent of 1 billion years of scientific progress in less than 1 year. And since then, this has been used to accelerate the development of new cures and new vaccines. So the possibilities with AI are really great, and it holds an immense economic potential. Reports suggest that it can contribute with trillions of dollars to the global economy. And in a Europe that has fallen behind in terms of economic growth and that needs to strengthen its competitiveness, this is good news. And the financial injection comes primarily from the fact that by working together with technology, for example, generative AI, we can become more productive and save time. And that time can be used for more value-creating activities. And this is, of course, also great opportunities for Sweden. Because as I see it, AI today is a possibility, but tomorrow it's a necessity. And regardless whether you initially are excited or hesitant, AI will fundamentally change the world as we know it. And while the previous wave of AI focused on enhancements in products, today's development in generative AI means that we can now all refine our abilities. And that's why we all need to think about what it takes for us, for our colleagues, and for our organizations to make full use of AI and generative AI's potential. And according to the EU's latest index for digital economy and digital society, Sweden lags behind in the category of business digitalization, especially when it comes to applying technologies such as AI. And this is worrying, since this is an area where Sweden has traditionally performed very well. One idea to the newly appointed AI Commission could be to figure out the equivalent of the home PC reform, but with a focus on AI. This would ensure that all Swedes have the opportunity to learn, understand, and then use the power of this technology. If we would succeed with getting the majority of Swedes along, that would mean a huge boost in both productivity and creativity. And many Swedes are eager to embrace AI, but we need to provide the necessary knowledge and the necessary tools. And furthermore, we have an incredible opportunity with Stockholm's vibrant tech scene. But to really truly seize it, we must invest in robust transition. This means investment in innovation and research, but also in education and digital skills across all segments of society. It also matters with what intention technology is developed. For us at Google, it's important that we develop technology with the people at the center and for the benefit of humanity. Innovation has always been a team sport, and we must take advantage of the possibilities of AI boldly, responsibly, and together. And just as great leaders are essential in sports, AI requires a new type of leadership as well, both within organizations and across organizations. A leadership with a clear vision and direction at the same time as exercising collaboration and coordination with governments, businesses, academia, civil society, and more. Only through this approach we can effectively translate technological breakthroughs into concrete benefits while responsibly managing associated risks. So it's my conviction that we, with the help of AI, can build Sweden stronger together. The world is in many ways more complex and more uncertain than it's been for a really long time. And AI is not the solution to every problem. But AI is one of the things that makes me feel inspired and curious about the future. Thank you.
And thank you, Anna. Thank you. We are kind of pushing our schedule, so I'd like a quick answer on what's on your wish list.
I think it is about the dialogues and collaborations across society and to really make sure that we get as many people as possible on board for this.
Okay, let's take that with us. Thank you so much, Anna Wikland.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lars Janov, his partner and head of EQT Ventures advisory team. He joined EQT in 2015. He's been lead advisory partner on more than 15 of EQT Ventures funds investments, most of which in consumer companies ranging from mobile gaming and digital health to SaaS software and fintech. And prior to EQT, Lars worked at King Digital. Today, he will talk about the future of global winners. So please welcome Lars Janov.
Always scary to have a big picture of yourself. So the quest for innovation, I think when I got the invite to speak here today, I reflected a bit. I actually don't think that I'm on a quest for innovation myself. I think fundamentally, being in the venture capital business, I'm in a client service business, and I'm here to enable entrepreneurs and founders to succeed on their quests for innovations. So this led me to think about what commonalities do we have in the most successful entrepreneurial quest for innovations in Sweden the last couple of decades. So I'm going to go through 6 of those, and hopefully you'll see a red thread. I'll also do some audience participation here, because we're approaching late afternoon. If you have wearables, you probably get pinged now. You need to stand up after an hour. So I'll do some raise of hands and audience polling here. So let's get started first. How many people in here have used the smooth Klarna checkout the last year? Raise of hands. Most people. 19 years ago, Sebastian, Victor, and Nicholas founded Klarna here in Stockholm with the vision to create the world's leading smooth payments product. Almost immediately after, Jane Valerud funded their first few months of work, and then shortly thereafter, Öresund Investment backed them to continue their journey towards commercialization. How many in here have a Spotify account active today? Also almost everyone. 18 years ago, Daniel and Martin founded Spotify with the ambition to bring streaming of music to the world of music lovers. 18 years ago. Martin self-funded, I think, the first few years before my fellow VCs, Creandum and Northzone, co-led a Series A in the company way before they even had a business model. Let's change gears a bit. How many of you believe that electrification is the future of transportation? Not as many as Spotify, but almost. 8 years ago, Peter and Paolo started Northvolt, which today is one of the biggest companies in Sweden. They were seeded by Harald Mix at Vargas Investment, and today, as you know, are one of the leaders in battery production globally. The next one, same year as Northvolt was started, Robert and Linnea founded Einride with the vision to make electric road transportation mainstream. The first few years were funded by angel investors, and then 4 years ago, EQT Ventures and Nordic Ninja led a Series A to bring that company to commercialization. 6 years ago, Anders co-founded Heart Aerospace. Talk about a quest for innovation. Heart Aerospace with a vision to make regional air travel electric. We did the seed round of that company 4 years ago. And today, I'm not going to ask you who has been on an electric airplane, because they're not yet flying. But in a couple of years, I think you'll be able to take a domestic flight in Sweden on a Heart Aerospace flight. The last one, I'll ask you, how many of you have been on an electric hydrofoiling ferry? 1, 2. This summer, or first of all, 10 years ago, Gustav Hasselskog founded Candela with the mission to electrify waterborne transportation. And this summer, you will all be able to enjoy the only emissions-free and the fastest way to commute between Ekerö and Stockholm's City Hall in one of the Candela ferries. So what do all these journeys, quests for innovations have in common? Well, I think, first of all, they're surprisingly long. The quest for innovation is not an overnight success. As you heard, some of these companies are 18, 19 years old. The ones that I mentioned that are 8 years old are still probably halfway through their journeys, and it's a real marathon. Secondly, and most importantly, my point today is that all of these companies were funded in the early stage by a local investor here in Sweden. And this is typical all over the world. Despite the globalized world we have today, most startups are funded in the early stage to get from zero to a launched product by local investors. So how do we stack up here in Sweden? I looked up this before going here. And in Sweden, we have, according to the internet, 527 VC firms, giving us I'm going to launch a new KPI here for society, how many VC firms per capita a country has. And Sweden has 0.04 VC firms per capita. And if we look over to where we could get to, if we look to California, in many ways the mecca for tech startups, and the heart of the innovation in the AI wave as well, there you have 5,700 VC firms on a population of 40 million. And so they have 0.15 VC firms per capita, more than 3 times as many as Sweden. Obviously, there's a correlation with founders starting companies, capital being available locally to fund these startups to go from 0 to 1. And I think if there's anything we can do here in the next decade, it is to promote both founders going for it, but also start more VC firms, make more angel investors, enable more entrepreneurs to get going on their quest for innovations so that Sweden can increase and go even further in creating the startup winners in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. So I'm trying to predict your answer to what you want to add to the wish list. More VC firms?
Yes, but also I think in the intro today, you mentioned that one of the strengths of Sweden was stability. I'm not sure if I agree. If you read the recent tax cases, for example, there's been a back and forth over the last decade around taxation of VC funds or private equity funds. And that's not really creating a stable environment where new investors want to expand to Sweden. Okay. So if you're a global VC firm today, why would you set up an office in Stockholm if you think you're going to be taxed 90% for doing so? So that's one area where I think there's room for improvement there.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm glad for an original answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next and last speaker is Henrik Mittelman. He is an independent analyst, award-winning columnist at Daily Industry, or Dagens Industri, with a past as head of analysis at SEB. And he says he constantly travels across the world to understand where the world economy is heading. And we do believe he'll challenge our thinking today with his topic of choice, Back to the Future. So please welcome Henrik Mittelman.
Right, thank you so much. I'm going to use my 8 minutes of fame to talk about the economic outlook and on how to make Sweden great again. Firstly, the economy. Well, you know, the perception of the economy is something like this. I do not agree. My name is Henrik Mittelman. I do different things. I write columns in the business daily Dagens Industri. I work closely with Renman Partners, with Carnegie Private Banking, where I'm also a very happy client. And I just recently released this book, Back to Success. Now you think that I'm here to sell the book, and you are right. Back to the economy. In media, we give clients what they want. And since the clients, the readers, are masochists, let's focus on the negatives. This was in the Swedish Dagens Nyheter a couple of months ago. Today comes the salary, soon it's over. Swedish television focusing on how we, together with psychologists, could talk to our kids about the business cycle downturn. This is not about the Ukraine. That's terrible, something we have challenges talking to kids about. No, this is about the business cycle downturn and about the fact that mom and dad now needs to pay a mortgage rate. Dr. Doom travels around the world conveying the message that we are now seeing a combination of the 30s and the 70s. I do not understand a word. I think this is where we are. We're coming from an environment, a strange environment on Excess Street. That was the environment with negative rates in a booming economy. Now we're in a sustainable environment on Main Street. I like Main Street. This makes me bullish. This is so last year. Back to the challenge of making Sweden great again. This is the reason why I hope you will read the book. You don't have to buy it, but just read it. Because we traveled the world, the photographer Malin Lauterbach and I, we traveled the world to find a recipe for success in different regions. Why should we invent the wheel once again when there are countries and regions doing great deeds for everyone and making sure that those regions and countries really prosper? So we went to different areas. Like, for example, Texas. Now you think that, well, Texas is all about oil and about, Ewing oil. You know what this is, right? Some of you do. Emelie, you're too young. You have no idea. Caroline of Ugglas. You don't remember. This is, of course, does someone know? Biljana. Sorry? Yes, South Fork. Of course it is. This is South Fork in Dallas. You know, the TV show in the 80s. It's about those evil oil barons. But Texas is something else as well. Texas is about attracting the right people, the right companies with the right incentives. And they really succeed in attracting great companies like in medtech, in healthcare, in general. Many of those headquarters are now located in Texas. How do they do that? Well, with an ambitious strategy, and it does help to not have an income tax. Italy is another example. The Italians have realized the importance of rich people. So why don't we make sure that we invite really rich people and make them pay a lump sum tax? And it's incredibly beneficial to be rich in Italy. And I know that we have friends around us moving from Stockholm to Italy to become residents, and it's quite easy, and then you have to pay a lump sum tax, which is reasonable, and then nothing else. Great initiative from Italy. Another country I really like is Ireland. I mean, as you know, most Irish people, they enjoy their Guinness and they like to watch football. And that's fine. I don't have any moral problems with that at all. But someone needs to finance that hobby. And they made sure that they invite great companies, great people from abroad, locate them in Ireland, and make sure that they stay there and they prosper. And Ireland went from being one of the poorest countries in Europe 50 years ago to now one of the richest countries. There are more examples. We can go to Switzerland, where the train does leave and arrive on time. But they also attract the right companies, the right people with the right incentives. You see the red thread here. We move over to Singapore. As you know, great success story. People mostly started smoking opium back in the 50s, poor as hell, and now prosperous. And now they're saying, well, those of you who do not like China taking over Hong Kong, those of you folk on family offices, for example, welcome to Singapore. Perfect match. Or we can go to Lithuania. Business Lithuania saying, welcome to Lithuania. We are open for business. And they mean it by giving great incentives, limited bureaucracy, and they've succeeded very well. So what I'm telling you is that for us to succeed and make Sweden great again, we need to attract the right people and the right companies with the right incentives. And yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. Do you want to hold up that book? I don't think you've shown it as many times. No.
I put it like this.
Yes, that's good. Looks like what do you call it, author
it
conversation.
Can be here. It can remain here, and then you take it home.
Of course, of course. Oh, thank you. Just sign it before you go. Okay. But I want you to tell me what's on the top of your wish list to have Stockholm to be innovative.
Attract the right people and the right companies with the right incentives. And then we need to be able to reduce taxes. Because without that, we can be, it's a nice place, but, it's good with lower taxes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. So to introduce the topic for the panel, which we have called the role of public versus private, since we have a tendency to put those two opposites each other. Public, if we're thinking that public means policymakers or the stock exchange, for example, and private could be the private market or private companies, for that matter. We tend to put them as opposite. But are they really opposites to each other? We think that they actually work within a quite complicated ecosystem, providing their specific strength to that system. And also with all relationships, communication and understanding each other is key to success. So our panel hope to shine light on strengths and challenges in that relationship and how we can ensure an efficient and harmonious future. Joining me on stage is Fredrik Ekström, outgoing CEO of Nasdaq Stockholm, Kristin Magnusson Bernard, CEO of Swedish pension fund First AP Fund, Thomas Pettersson, partner at law firm Mannheimer Swartling, and Henrik von Sydow, strategist at Carnegie Investment Bank. Please welcome them up.
Ja, tryck på med applåd.
I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't get any music.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We fixed that in the post-production video.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so let me start you by asking, as I was introducing, Kristin, you can actually take a step back. There we go. Do you think that the public and private are opposites, or do you work together?
My short answer would be no. I realize we are the only thing standing between you and drinks, but I will still elaborate a little bit. My job is to provide excellent returns on your pension capital. We feel we can do that in private markets. We can do it in public markets. What I see as my responsibility as an investor is to make sure that a company chooses to stay in private markets or go public, stay public for the right reasons. That is, that company will thrive either in a public or in a private setting. And maybe we can come back to a little bit around regulatory issues, transparency, participation, etc. in a little while, because it's not quite so easy.
Anything you wish. Fredrik, what do you say?
No, I think we have work in symbiosis. We have the public market, the stock exchanges, we have private equity, we have bank funding. All of these three sources of funding are required to really drive the capital market and support companies. And we support companies in different stages, in different type of economies. Sometimes it's more public funding, sometimes it's more bank funding. But overall, I think that mix is very important. And we have a pretty good mix here in Sweden, the Nordics. It's a little bit worse in Europe, where sort of bank funding still is very, very dominant.
Let me just remind the audience before we move on as well, if you want to submit questions, could be anonymous. If you want to me, for me to bring up to the panel, you can do so on menti.com. It's a new 8-digit code, so please enter that one if you want to submit a question as well. Henrik, can I just get into your background a little bit, because I think it's very interesting, given you have been a member of the Swedish Parliament and quite maybe the definition of public. And
I might say so, yes.
Meanwhile, the last decade, you've worked very closely with the private equity side or private market side for Carnegie. Your experience, are they in sync?
Well, actually, it was 8 years ago since I took the quite short walk from the Swedish Parliament to Carnegie. It's less than 10 minutes, but it's quite a huge cultural step in a sense. I would say that there are huge differences, actually. One main misunderstanding between legislators and the finance sectors are how you view time as a perspective. There is a view among legislators and regulators that the financial markets and the financial sectors are very short-term in a sense. And on the other way, there is a perspective from the financial markets that the parliament and the legislator should have a very long perspective on regulation. It's actually, unfortunately, the other way around. It's the other way around. The investors that I meet most frequently are very long-term perspective. They discuss investment over years, more than years. The dynamic among legislators, you might think that it's 4 years, the term is 4 years, but it's actually, 1 week. In politics is a long time. And the everyday life dynamics is 24 hours, the news cycles. And that creates a lot of problem and collision between the two different mindsets in that perspective, and bringing up headlines that affect the regulatory environment, the tax environment, and those issues. So that's actually a key misunderstanding between the different sectors. And that leads to other ways, from my perspective, I think that legislators really underestimate how important the factor of financial markets are for driving growth. Underestimate the factor and also take it for granted in different perspectives. We can get back to that. Yeah.
Thomas, is it fair to say that you're in the middle of both these sides? Because you're a private company yourself, you're not publicly listed, not state-owned, but in the meantime you're upholding maybe the most public we think of, law.
Yeah, that may be true. And I actually think that the answer, well, not the answer to the question, but my take on the question is that it's probably a bit of both. It is a bit of polar opposites if you look at it from a regulatory perspective, where I'm coming from. Generally speaking, it isn't, because you need a dialogue and cooperation and you need to work together. But at the same time, for a regulatory environment to work, I think there needs to be a certain amount of at least respect, possibly to a certain extent some fear as well, for a regulator to work. It just has to be done in a good way, because in effect they have to enforce and focus the regulation on the institutions that are subject to them.
Christine, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that excellent point, because I think there's a risk that, given that the participation in stock markets, for example, is also open to the general public, you can participate with the smallest possible ticket. Issues such as consumer protection, etc., tends to be focused on the public side. And we need to make very sure that the regulatory framework creates a level playing field between the public and the private side of markets. Because otherwise I see a risk that the beauty of public markets, which is that everybody can participate, will get lost if also institutional investors such as ourselves state or increasingly go private, because it's sometimes actually an easier regulatory burden.
And not picking up the thread on regulatory burden, but some other that is kind of having with that democracy perspective as you have. Fredrik, I've been thinking about, or rather here, I don't know if this is empirically true, but heard that internationally speaking, or international context, the stock exchange, the Stockholm Stock Exchange, is more volatile and a bit more unstable than other comparable stock exchange? No, Christine is shaking her head.
She's my speaker today.
Nice.
No, but I mean, first of all, volatility is mainly macro-driven. It's not exchange-specific driven. But of course, the company traded on the exchange could impact volatility somewhat. But if you look at our sort of large companies, the most traded one, OMX S30 companies, the volatility in those companies are in line with other European main indices. And then, of course, you have First North, which is the dominant and leading market in Europe for SMEs. Of course, those type of companies have more volatility than larger, more mature companies. So that there's a difference there is not strange at all. And then, on top of this, Stockholm Stock Exchange is the best performing exchange in the world since 1966 in terms of absolute return. So, of course, return comes with some risk. So there is a little bit of correlation here between risk and return. But that fact together, I would say that you cannot single out an exchange saying it's more volatile than others. It's mainly macro, it's driven by the company, but it's also, the most important is, what does that risk correspond to in return?
Henrik, I'm thinking about maybe international clients at Carnegie. Do they think something of what I've heard, that the Stockholm Stock Exchange is a little bit more volatile, doesn't feel as stable as others maybe?
No, if there is an interest for engaging in the Swedish market and the our stock exchange, I would say that international investors are not bringing up the issues on volatility on the stock market. No, they understand the dynamics if they are interested of our stock market. They know the industrial composition of the stock market, that there is a lot of cyclical companies, a lot of small and middle-sized companies, and what kind of effect that has on the dynamic in the market. So I would say international investors understand the stock markets as well as the domestic investors if they are interested in it. So for sure. But there are other issues, more structural issues that they bring up. One big thing today, the NATO membership. Also, we talked about the currency importance. Those things have been bringing up in discussions about investing in Sweden during the last two years in that sense.
So the fact that we're becoming members of NATO in like 15 minutes, that is actually something your clients are looking forward to?
I would say that that's not a major thing, but how Sweden has been the odd one out in the Nordic when it comes to some aspects of how we are international organized and structured has brought up for international investors. I mentioned the currency and NATO membership. Now when we fix NATO membership, when it's settled down, there are going to be more questions about Euro membership. That might be even more important for international investors in aspects.
Thomas, your international investors, international clients, what are they? Why are they drawn to Stockholm, and what may they criticize?
Well, first of all, I don't think the volatility is a bit outside my comfort zone, but I don't really feel that that's the issue. I think if you see sort of either domestic parties moving out from Stockholm, is probably size to a certain extent. Being in the New York or London may be more attractive. Being sort of lured into Sweden, I think it's more the stability, professional advisors, those kind of things. It's a stable investment environment, I would say. And I don't think from a regulatory perspective that, and this may be sort of getting ahead of things, but we don't really see that from our clients to be an issue. I mean, we may have complaints, with things that we would like to get better when we work in that environment, but that doesn't necessarily mean that international clients see that as a problem coming in. To the contrary, I think we actually come out quite well in those situations.
Fredrik, did you have maybe a comment to Christine's earlier comment about how it could be easier to invest in private market or outside the stock exchange because of regulation burden is easier?
Of course. I mean, regulation, if it is complex, if it is burdensome, is a little bit of a hurdle for investments. So that's why a level play field between public and private is very important. It's equally important, as we heard earlier today, that there's a level playing field between regulation being implemented in Europe and here in Sweden. So regulation play a very important role. But then when we sort of measure also investment and capital raised between sort of private market and public market, we should not only look at sort of the IPO raised capital, we should also look at the secondary market, how a company listed on an exchange through a journey actually raised capital maybe 2-3 times in that journey, and the importance of this ecosystem, investors that keep backing those smaller companies along their journey. So when we look at raised capital, public, private, we should not only look at the IPO, we should look at also secondary market.
Yeah, and everything comes with their own challenges over different periods. And if I speak to my peers, say, for example, US pension funds, Canadian pension funds, also the European ones, for a while there was a one-way street into private markets. Everybody said, okay, my key thing is to increase my allocation to private markets. Then something happened over the last 18 months. And what happened was increased scrutiny around valuations. Because the beauty of the stock market is that you might not think the price is right, but the price is always there. And as an investor, your fiduciary duty is to be able to say, I invested in this company, it's worth this thing. And during the sort of very dramatic period we've been through, it's been harder to actually scrutinize private market valuations, which especially when I speak to my US peers, has have caused them to kind of reassess their stance a little bit. And I'll be very curious to see where this plays out, since I like to do the opposite of what other people do to make returns on your capital. I'm a contrarian. It's probably the time to go into private markets if everybody else is pulling back. But there is a changing dynamic here, which will be interesting to see how it plays out.
Now she's not my spokesperson anymore.
On that note, we've been talking the whole afternoon about the dynamics in the ecosystem, and that's really a strength. And one key aspect of that dynamic is that you actually have symbiosis and bridges between public and private market. That's one key aspect on that. It's a danger if we keep regarding this as as a possible way to go wrong, as parallel worlds, at different worlds. You have to keep up. You have to make it. Of course, we need a strong, good condition for a private market. When companies there are growing, they are ready, not too early, to go into the public market. And the public market, since we talked about this with a time perspective, also must prove that they have a long-term perspective, also in the public market, so that they have a tolerance for these kinds of transitions that we talked about in the former panel, etc.
It touches on a question we have gotten from the audience who says, private and public have a symbiotic relationship and challenge each other. How do we make sure they challenge each other in a healthy/positive direction?
Well, my sort of, well, you keep both in your portfolio, but that's easy to say if you have my job. No, but I think, for example, when you see IPOs, they need to be successful. They need to kind of be able to sustain the valuations that you've seen, because you need to make sure that the valuation, including the premia you've maybe seen in private market, are actually sustained. On the other hand, there might be occasions where actually a company is better being delisted. For a while, it might go through certain type of major reorganizations or major changes of business models, heavy investments. Maybe that's better in a private setting for a while. So in general, I think to see a healthy flow between the two, at least to me as an investor, would be one way of saying that this two-way street is actually working.
Anyone want to add something to that?
No, but I agree, and I think it comes back to what I said in the beginning. When companies are at different stages at their journey, private versus public could be more relevant. And we also saw when we had this inflation shock and very sharp increase of interest rate, that the valuation was super difficult, private and public, and then bank funding increased instead, because that was an easier way, because the market was not really open for funding. So again, all the different sources of funding play a key role in supporting the economy, but it could be at different stages.
Further question from the audience. Is there a difference in public versus private funding in Stockholm versus rest of Sweden? And if yes, why?
You mean rest?
Test here. Sorry?
Well, I would guess that much of the venture capital, the private equity funding, is concentrated here in a sense, although given that my background is in the well-known region of Gnosjö, where we have all our family businesses, there tends to be quite a bit of private equity interest, I would say, in that area too. But naturally, you would have bank financing dominating the small local companies in many parts of the world. Because after all, the first way to fund your company is your mortgage. The second one is probably your mom and dad, and then at some stage you go to the bank.
Of course, I mean, we have seen a little bit in the northern part of Sweden now this sort of green tech boom, and of course that is, at this stage at least, very much private equity.
That's a good question to raise when we're talking about Stockholm as a city of a capital of finance. But actually, there are growing companies in other parts of Sweden as well, for sure. Jönköping, Linköping, those kinds of areas. You mentioned the northern parts. You can really see growth.
No, he's my spokesperson. That's my hometown.
Yeah.
And Thomas, I'm guessing your answer would be no, since I'm guessing there's no law differences.
That's true, but we see the same picture, that if we look at where the financing's coming in at the moment, many of the major projects are not Stockholm-based. I mean, it's big wind power plants, it's the green steel stuff and things like that. So clearly we're not that Stockholm-centric, although I agree that a lot of things are.
Another question from the audience, which feels like a Henrik question. From the capital markets view, and in the interest of being a capital of finance, what will be the most obvious effects of adopting the euro?
Well, perhaps you can argue both ways. No, I'm not arguing for a euro membership. If we speak from an international investor perspective, I think there is a need for clarity. What are we going to do with our currency? It might be a program for joining the euro. It might be a decision to still stay out. But clarity about that choice, that would be the international investor perspective. So I don't have a strong perspective on the euro. It would make it easier, would take back the currency risks for Sweden in perspective. And again, we are more like others. We are the odd one out when it comes to the currency in the Europe perspective. So those are aspects.
I also would like to add that apart from the currency regime, one of the least talked about but incredibly important projects in the EU is the Capital Markets Union. And you've heard this acronym, the CMU, for decades. Most of you are dead tired of it. But the reason why, as the excellent speech from Vinnova earlier alluded to, why do the scale-up happen in Silicon Valley? Well, they have deep, liquid, integrated capital markets. And our problem is that they are still local. So we do not benefit from the EU's internal market when it comes to capital. And then if we had that big pool of savings, that big, ecosystem of all sorts of investors, I believe more of our companies would actually scale up and grow in Europe instead. And actually making the Capital Markets Union, we need lots and lots of lawyers with all their patience to untangle the mess of all these local regulations. But you cannot overestimate how important that is.
This also kind of feels like a Thomas question, giving the regulation and the role of the public or authorities within the financial markets. They're usually quite heavily regulated, or at least we say that they're very heavily regulated. Are they too regulated?
I think most people would agree, yes. And I think anyone would, I mean, you can't really grasp the level of regulatory requirements for financial services as of today. At the same time, it's part of some kind of quality stamp and stuff like that. So I think you do need it to a certain extent. But I mean, obviously, the tsunami that's been going on since the Lehman crisis is quite significant and doesn't seem to stop. So it's very costly and very resource requirement.
But I think that's a very important point. But going back to EU and CMU, there is also this work on EU on competition that has top priority now, I would say. And we talk about competition. You have to also talk about all of this regulation and actually look in the mirror. Did everything played out as we expected or wanted? If not, maybe we should take something back.
Add one more thing on that is that obviously a lot of this is now European. It's not necessarily domestic, so it's not a competition issue between countries, other than as insofar that how the authorities apply it and what kind of dialogue and sort of cooperation they have in applying these things. And I think we have a slight drawback being in a smaller country where the authorities are slightly more hesitant to sort of walk the plank and take a position on unclear areas, because obviously they would prefer if Germany or France or somebody else did that first. So that may be one slightly complicating factor being in a smaller jurisdiction.
Let me check with the room if someone have a question they want to ask. You can just raise your hand and Malin will come with a microphone in that case. So if someone is interested to ask a question, just raise your hand. Malin will get it to you. Otherwise, I'll continue doing the job. Thank you very much. So it sounds like you are quite in this intricate ecosystem. You sound like, no, we're working well together. Is it really that seamless? Do you understand each other?
Well, I certainly hope so, because otherwise it would be at least either 75 or 25% of my portfolio that I did not understand, and that would be a horrible sort of feeling to have. I think it's rather, again, coming back to the fiduciary duty, coming back to the responsibility of investing other people's money. It's my responsibility is always to be able to explain what's going on, and especially when it comes to the growth of some parts of which is, popularly often called shadow banking, not so much the equity side, but rather the debt side. How much that was a response to some of the Lehman regulation you referred to, and how that will play out, especially on the US side? I think there are lessons to be learned there, because again, it's at the end of the day, it's your money and everybody's money. And if we lose out that trust, which is really the glue that holds the financial sector together, we're in bad shape. So no, not everything is fine and dandy, unfortunately.
Erik?
No, but I do think that sort of the ecosystem we have in Sweden and the Nordics around capital markets really is not so much competing between the investors, the corporates, the advisors, the lawyers. It actually is working towards trying to fund in the most efficient way, create a market which is transparent and open for everyone. And we have this retail participation that Niklas talked about this morning. All of that actually help sort of the creation of the Spotify and the Klarna and all of that, because I think innovation needs a well-functioning capital market. So there is no, usually argument comes when there is maybe a conflict of sort of where sort of the benefits or where we're going, but I don't see that between the participant in the capital market. We all play our role in sort of making this happen.
Thomas, an honest answer now. Do they understand each other?
I would say yes, although obviously sometimes there will be skirmishes between them, I think. But an interesting reflection on the regulatory side is that the questions we get aren't typically about whether we have a friendlier environment or something like that. It's actually whether we have gold-plated, whether we've had put in higher standards than other, because that became sort of the mark of excellence, that is to be slightly tougher than everyone else. So I think that's been a big part of investigations and surveys and things like that, to try to establish whether we have sort of done a little bit more than we should to be a little bit more attractive.
Henrik?
Well, one aspect, the deputy mayor of London said that we have the market. We have a huge market. London is also a very big city. Stockholm is not that big. Sometimes international investors raise this up. So it's great to be in Stockholm. You can have 8 meetings per day. That's not possible in London because it's more difficult with transport and logistics as well. And that's keeping public and private markets together. We have them at the same time on one day at Carnegie. We are very much in the center of this ecosystem. We are giving advice to institutional investors, to industrial investors, to VC investor, PE investor, pension fund investor, private investor, and entrepreneurs active on both private and public markets. And it's very convenient in a sense. We were very close to each other. So definitely there's partnership there. Where there is room for improvement when it comes to partnership, it's with the public, in the sense of legislators and regulators. And Thomas touched on the topic.
You want to name names?
No, but we can all participate to that, actually. Lots of people here today. If we want to increase the level of understanding between private and public in the sense of legislature and regulator, have 3 lunches with former colleagues or friends working at agencies and authorities or departments before midsummer. If you're really aggressive, do it before Easter. Then we together would increase the level of understanding, actually. But it's very easy in Stockholm. They work just around the corner. So that's one way to increase the level of understanding between the sectors.
Thomas?
I think tying into that, I think that there is a tradition, almost like an old court tradition in Sweden, where authorities sort of stand to the side and the subjects are on the other side. And I think partly that's related to the authorities not really daring to give some kind of advanced rulings. There I actually think that's a pretty easy fix, to be honest. I think having those discussions and being open to have those discussions, and this is primarily in relation to the FSA, Finansinspektionen, but at the same time saying that it's not binding. You don't get an advanced ruling, but it will give you some kind of benefit if you subsequently are found to be wrong. It's a mitigating factor that you've sought some kind of discussion. Because I can see the problem for authorities not being able to preempt a final test, but at the same time, it's kind of bad that you don't try to get people to do the right thing.
So our time is about to run out. So yes, Henrik, I want to hear about improvements.
Yeah, improvements. A low-hanging fruit for the government, for the minister who opened this session. Actually give the instruction to the agency to actually working with advising how to implement the rules. Actually working with promoting. We're open for business. We heard that earlier. Something like that from the agency would have been quite forward-leaning policy from government to actually make this a more flourish financial center.
Final reply.
Yeah, thank you. So to end on a happy note, I just want to give you an example. Actually, when the authorities approached us, people in the financial sector, and asked, why is nobody providing project financing anymore? It's crucial to make equity startups such as Northvolt and other take off. Why are the banks not doing this anymore? And we sat down and we explained, the dark side of the Basel rules and how this could actually, in an ecosystem, work a lot better. And it is now happening. So, yes, it's possible.
Yes, we can, as Henrik Mittel.
Absolutely.
Fredrik, improvements.
One wish is actually that our regulators and the Swedish FSA get on their list of duties to also look at competition, to create a competitive capital market. I think they should have that within their assignment.
Okay, good. We got
be outspoken with it. The government should be outspoken. They should mention it. That's our policy, and that's a key stone in a more forward-leaning economic policy for growth. Low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit. That's the final word of today. Thank you so much to the panel for ending today's summit. So before I let you go and we have some drinks for you, let me just bring up quickly the key representative behind this initiative of capital finance, Peter Sandberg from the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. Please join me.
Thank you. And then I'm fully aware that I'm the last thing standing between you and the drinks, which I hope you're all staying on for. But I just wanted to share a few thoughts from my end and key takeaways, and feel free to do the same. But there's a lot to take away from there. First thing, I think, listening to the Swedish Minister for Financial Markets saying how healthy the status of Stockholm as a financial center is, reassuring, and how robust, I think he said, that it is, but also how there is a greater need for collaboration and the need to attract capital. And I think that plays well into the last panel as well. Every city in the world, every country in the world is now fighting for development capital, innovation capital, and you want to hear politicians say it. Because once you've said it, you then need to do something about it. We all know it in this room, I assume, and I feel like politics is waking up as well. We then have the Deputy Mayor of London here, the delightful Mr. Dorber, who shed some light on London as a financial centre. I also think he flattered Stockholm a lot, which is very British of him, but he also alluded to some of its potential, saying that if London had as many successful startups as Stockholm, it would be greater than Silicon Valley. That is alluding to the potential of what we could do and what we could build if we had an even stronger financial market in Sweden. But he also highlighted what makes London unique, which is what we just addressed in the last panel, which is what happens when public and private come together and they collaborate. He talked about the City of London, which might be, an old guise of an institution, but what it's done for London is unique. The City of London has ambassadors all over the world, making sure that London is the place where you have your IPO, where you do your business. That is one of the key successes to London as a financial centre. I mean, that's far away for us, but there are things that we can do as well. There's a few recurring themes. Stockholm has a strong and healthy financial centre. It has unique potential and a unique position, and the world is on a quest for innovation and capital. So we need to collaborate more, we need to build on our strengths, and I think we talked about that today as well. Sustainable businesses, sustainable business model, sustainability. I mean, if we can't compete there, and if Sweden can't compete there, who can? And lastly, the slightly more subdued one, which is regulation needs to be fair but competitive as well. And that's what we're going to continue discussing within Capital Finance. So thanks for joining us. I know you've been here for almost 5 hours now. So congratulations to you too. You passed the test. We're going to continue doing this. So any input into our agenda over the next year, feed in. Because we're looking at how we can make Stockholm an even more, a better thriving financial center. We need your help. You're all part of it. But remember, we do it together with you, but we also do it on behalf of the wider, the greater business community. We're not doing this for the financial services community. We're doing it because we know that it's good for Stockholm. It's good for our innovative power and our attractiveness. I think Wikman alluded to that as well. It's the whole attractiveness of Stockholm that lies the foundation for a successful center, even Arlanda. But I'd like to give Emelie a big round of applause. Hasn't she done it fantastically today? She made it seem effortlessly, but it wasn't. There's a lot of work going into. Thank you so much for doing that. Thanks to our partners, Vogel & Partners. Thanks to Nasdaq. Thanks to Mannheim Swartling for supporting us on our quest for this. And thanks to Chris and his team for helping us with cake and everything today. There are drinks on the other end of it, and we call it After Summit, and it starts now.
Almost. I just want to say thank you from my end as well. You've been a very engaging audience, which always makes these kind of summits better. So thank you so much on behalf of me and Vogel & Partners. Now drinks.